Well, today it is farewell to the Alps for another year, but it's not farewell to the memories yet, because we are in for a very special day today as the riders head to Alpe d'Huez, and it is a glorious day. Chilly air at 62 Fahrenheit, 7 miles an hour the wind, mostly sunny, and Alpe d'Huez there's a massive crowd awaiting the arrival of the Tour de France, and we are going to show you live on Versus every turn of the wheels today. As always, these beautiful pictures available in high definition. Well, there we are, live pictures. It's unusual, but they're not starting until 2:30 local time today here in France. It's a short stage, Paul. It's only 109 kilometers. They're lining up here in the town of Modane, very small town which separates the Savoie from Italy. It's going to be very quick.
It's going to be very scary, especially if you're a sprinter as well. We'll see lots of action from the climbers today, and today we will finally, possibly, I would say, get an idea who is going to win this Tour de France overall. But I, being a non-climber myself in the old days, actually had a quick look at the elimination times. The elimination times today could be as low as 21 minutes after the winner's time.
Which is very low, and the riders will play safe like they did yesterday, of course, because Mark Cavendish on the front here in his green jersey lost 20 points of his lead because he finished outside of the elimination time. But because of another rule, where there were too many riders in the group, in fact 50% of the field was alongside Mark, they obviously couldn't kick out 50% of the field, so because of that he wasn't eliminated from the race, but he did lose 20 points off his green jersey. There he is, Thomas Voigtler, 10 days in yellow, and his scant lead now just 15 seconds.
See a couple of riders at the back there with the yellow numbers. 56 is David Miller, and they're wearing the yellow numbers because Garmin Cervelo are the leaders of the team classification. In fact, they extended their lead in that competition yesterday to 10.5 minutes. They're on their way, and they've got a little bit of a neutralised section to begin with. Then once the white flag comes in from the race organiser's car, Christian Prudhomme, we will see, I think, a little bit of fireworks right from the gun.
And the neutralised section is just 5 minutes today for these 168 riders who survive. 30 riders only dropping out in 3 weeks, and the vast majority of those through serious injury, breakage of bones, etc. So we're heading out of Modane and heading now towards the Alpe. We will first of all set fur for, yes, that place again, the Col de Galibier, where we finished on top yesterday. We don't go quite up to the dizzy height where the finishing line was, but we're not far short, and we'll come down the way the riders raced up.
Little chat to Thomas Voigtler there from Jérôme Pinault, just having a quick chat. I think everybody in France is amazed at the courage of this man who has held on to that yellow jersey. I think we all expected him to lose it yesterday. In fact, about 3 times so far we expect him to lose that yellow jersey, and he's kept it and kept a firm grip on it. Today, theoretically, and everything has to be theoretically at the moment, the way this Tour de France is unfolding, he should lose it on the slopes of the Alpe.
Well, this is taking him back to 2004, where he held the jersey for 10 days, and now he is in his 10th day in yellow today. But will it be the end? As he says goodbye to the Alps, 15 seconds. It seems highly improbable now he will keep his yellow jersey. It seems to be a 3-horse battle between Andy and Frank Schleck and Cadel Evans, who are separated by just 57 seconds.
I'll tell you one thing,
Paul.
Horrible, absolutely horrible. If you're a non-climber today, the first category climb there is the Col du Telegraphe, and then you've got that massive long climb to the outside categorized climb of the Col du Galibier from the long side, and then down into Bourg d'Oisans for the sprint point, and then finally the 13.5 kilometer ascent, 21 cornered Alpe d'Huez.
Now they've redesigned the green jersey and tried to bring it back for the pure sprinters of the race this year, altering the point structure and everything else, and for that reason I can't understand why they've chosen the sprint point at the foot of Alpe d'Huez, because the sprinters won't be there to take part in that sprint. Let's have a look at the overall standings, taking into account the 20 points removed from Mark Cavendish. Rojas finished 2 minutes ahead of him yesterday and was not in the elimination time, so he didn't lose any points, so he's only 15 points behind Mark Cavendish.
Just to make a point there, Phil, it wasn't just Mark Cavendish that lost 20 points, it was everybody else in that group with him, because they finished outside of the time limit. But obviously it was more important for Cavendish, and that's going to make that a very tight race right the way to the Champs-Élysées.
And in that group were 82 riders, can you believe? And they knew they were safe. They could have pedalled home all day, because the rule says you can't kick out 82 riders even though they're outside the elimination time. Cavendish on the front, looking cool. He knows this is his big day today. If he gets through today without being eliminated, then he'll be okay in the time trial tomorrow, and he'll be looking to win on Sunday in Paris.
Well, one thing's for certain, the faster, and that's the way the elimination time works. In fact, the faster the stage is, the higher the percentage of the winner's time. So if they go fast today, and if they get a speed as high as 35 kilometers an hour average speed, the elimination time will be 15%, which corresponds to 27 minutes.
Well, as we leave Modane, this is the town which enjoys 300 days of sunshine a year, and thank heavens this is one of those 300 as the riders go up into the high mountains yet again. Thomas Voeckler has had more than a week in that Maillot Jaune. He's really developed as a star of French cycling. There have even been those who believed he could win the Tour, but he's a realist, I think.
Well, I think one thing for certain, Phil, it all depends on the tactics of the guys like the Schlecks and Cadel Evans. They need to go out and race this stage very hard today, because if they ride tactically, ride and watch each other, and they ride steadily over the climbs, if Thomas Voeckler is still in contact by the bottom of the Alpe d'Huez, he'll start to nurture thoughts of winning this Tour de France.
Everybody, le départ est donné. Kilometre zero, we are underway, and I suspect we're going to have a very fast start, and there to prove it, immediately out of the traps, the racing.
Well, Vacansoleil on the attack immediately. Euskaltel-Euskadi in the orange jersey, BMC, that looked like Marcus Burkhardt. He has got to get into the breakaway again to try and look after Cadel Evans a little bit later on. I would like to see the tactics of Cadel Evans and Team BMC today coming out and being aggressive and actually taking the race to the Schlecks.
We are going on one of the what will be most certainly most dramatic of the 3 weeks of racing here between the Schlecks and Cadel Evans. We are going to see tactics from the gun, and normally we don't take our pictures till down the road a ways when the breakaway has established. Today, because they're not available from French television for anybody in the world, it's not just us that misses out on that, we are now able to watch racing from the gun here, and tactics immediately being put in. Johnny Hoogeland on the left of our picture, who we've seen so much in the action for 3 weeks, already on the attack. Well, Michael Shaw, I think, the tall man there from BMC.
Well, just looking back, there doesn't seem to be much reaction, and I can see a number of black jerseys coming forward, and that's Team Sky. They lost the lead in their Best Young Rider competition yesterday. Rigoberto Urán had a very difficult day in the mountains.
A reasonably flat start. In fact, it's almost downhill for just a few moments as we leave Modane on our profile today. So they've got good roads as well. Then they'll be getting on to the lower slopes of the Col de Telegraph, and that's 11.9 kilometers. As we go through the roundabouts here now, we are watching the whole peloton really aliven up from the gun. We feel this will be a very, very fast stage, because it is a showdown between Andy and Frank Schleck and Cadel Evans. Everybody else in this race, I respectfully will call the bit players of the Tour de France, because this is a three-man race to Alpe d'Huez.
This is Marcus Burkhardt, the rider in black and red for Team BMC Racing. Obviously been given the order by Team BMC, get into that early breakaway, because we're going to need you later on in the event, because Cadel Evans is going to try today and lay the foundations for a victory.
Chris Horner or Dave Zabriskie with us. The peloton are ripping along the around the sides of the Arc River here at the moment. There are 14 riders now in that breakaway already. There's 14 men working well together, 204 here. Johnny Hoogeland was one of the first to get into the move. He's anxious to get on and see if he can get more points in the King of the Mountains. He was the early leader of that. Had a spectacular crash on the road to Saint Flour when he went into that barbed wire fence. Seems to have recovered over the next 10 days, though. So as the riders speed on, we'll try and get you all of those names. Utazan is in there. André Greipel, the sprinter, is in there. Maxime Iglinski, who was in the mountains riding well yesterday, is there. Rui Costa, the Portuguese, who won his stage at Superbest. Gutierrez of Movistar. Caran of Liquigas. Riblon of AG2R. Fletcher of the Sky team, and there is Alberto Contador, cracked big time yesterday, lost nearly 4 minutes, and now Alberto Contador having to see if he can just put himself back into this race today, at least to distinguish himself. Now there's Andy Schleck, second in the black, behind teammates here, just looking around. That's Jakob Fuglsang there at the front, protecting the leader. Schleck looks pretty happy with the way the race has started. A little bit of a smile with the teammates, ex-teammates of his, but still the teammates of Alberto Contador.
Well, Phil, I have to tell you, I think I tell you this every year, but it would be remiss of me to avoid mentioning that in 218 BC, Hannibal marched down here with 90 infantry, 12,000 cavalry and 37 elephants. And that was one of the remarkable crossings of the Alps on his way into Italy.
Yes, he made a big name for himself. Who's going to make a big name for themselves today?
Sure that they start this climb once they get into Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne in the first 15 positions.
Well, the 14 leaders have just started the climb. Our cameras are giving you a nice helicopter view here of the riders snaking their way away from the autoroute in France, heading now towards the much narrower roads, the approach of the Col de Telegraphe, and then a little bit of a downhill and straight onto the slopes of the Col du Glibier. Two climbs coming up, then a long descent down to Bourg d'Oisonne, where any sprinters nearly in touch at the top might get back on. Here's the crowd, and this is going to be an excellent stretch of racing now.
Well, of the riders in the breakaway, there's a number of riders have won stages in the Tour de France before. Greipel and Costa have won stages this year. Christophe Rablon won a stage last year. Juan Antonio Fletcher won a stage over by Toulouse, and Marcus Burkhardt also a former winner. But today, it's the different things these guys are looking for. There are different tactics being involved out on the road. For Marcus Burkhardt, he's not thinking about trying to win at Alpe d'Huez. He's thinking about trying to be a platform for Cadel Evans later on in the event, much as we saw the same manoeuvre happen yesterday by Leopard Trek, putting two riders in the early breakaway.
Well, 14 riders here, but I think Andre Greipel is number 33, if you can just see him ahead of us there. He'd be one of the first boys in trouble. 10.9 kilometers is the climb to the top of the Col de Glibier. And we've still 93 kilometers to go, which is a short day of racing today. The riders have only been racing 20 minutes, and here they are now on the first mountain stage of the day.
Well, I think Andre Greipel getting into that breakaway, Phil, like many of the sprinters, thinks, well, let me have a 2 or 3 minute advantage before we start the climb of the Col du Telegraphe, and then I've got a much better chance of finding a comfortable position in the autobus. A lot of riders were concerned yesterday about that elimination time, and I would think today they will also be quite concerned.
Yeah.
Elimination time on a short stage is extremely scary. In fact, there's a special elimination percentage for a short mountain stage. And if the race is at an average of 32 kilometers now, just only 18, 19 miles an hour, the elimination is 12% of the winner's time.
This looks like it might be Chris Anker Sorensen, who's having a little dig away from the front. Is this a plan by Alberto Contador, his team captain, telling him to get up front and stretch his legs?
Well, Alberto Contador said very early on in the year that one of the things that he really wanted to do was win Alpe d'Huez. It is an iconic finish that all of the greats of the sport want to win on it. So maybe this is the move by Saxo Bank this afternoon to try and provide the leapfrog for Alberto Contador a little bit later on.
Well, Sorensen is a good climber, and he's a good carrot too as he starts to move off there. He may be presenting Alberto, taking the attention of the race away from Alberto. The race may be lulled into the feeling that after what we saw yesterday in the Glibier, Alberto hasn't got it, and he's over 4 minutes behind now overall, so he won't be quite the mark man. This is the action of the breakaway. Greipel's number 33 sitting near the back. 22 is Izaguirre from Euskaltel Euskadi.
Yeah, well, putting Contador, Phil, yes, 4 minutes behind Thomas Voeckler, but in fact, right behind the rest of the guys, he's not very much more than just over 3 minutes, for example, behind Frank Schleck, and only 3 minutes behind Cadel Evans. So if he's recovered and bounced back overnight on this short stage, it actually suits his climbing abilities a lot more.
Well, if he was to get to the top as winner, or at least up to 2 minutes ahead of Andy Schleck or Frank Schleck or Cadel Evans in the time trial tomorrow, then Alberto Contador could take more than a minute out of them with ease. He'd all of a sudden be winner of his 4th Tour de France. So it's all possible. It's all down to the legs today.
It's all down to the combinations and the tactics, but I can just see the black and white jerseys there completely in control at the front end of the peloton. That, of course, is Leopard Trek. Much as they toughened the race up yesterday, they're going to try and adopt the same tactic this afternoon. This is Raim Termay. He's their best young rider now. He took that mantle over yesterday after a very good ascent of the Col du Galibier. That's Stuart O'Grady on the inside, the Leopard Trek. These guys in this group now, they can sit here and allow everybody else to do the pacemaking, but we've already got about a minute advantage from the yellow jersey group over this group now being led by Ivan Basso and his team.
This must be confusing to the Leopard Trek. They were expecting to set the pace here for Andy Schleck. Now there's no need for them to select the place because Andy is up the road. Frank would like to be up the road, but the interesting point was he had his chance and he couldn't hold it. He's gone back into the field here. Sylvester Smith, the ever-faithful pacemaker for Ivan Basso in the mountains, sits at the front here and just taps out the rhythm Basso looking as though the pace is hurting him, and those 5 front runners, Burkhardt is still with them. They are now only 33 seconds behind, getting onto the tail of the breakaways.
Fabian Cancellara, the pacer, a little bit too hot for him this afternoon. He will come out to play tomorrow, Phil, when we do the individual time trial around Grenoble.
This will be 5 kilometers to go to the top, as we're now on a 7% gradient here. This is the breakaway group who've gone through 5 kilometers, 3 miles to the top of the Col du Telegraph, and we don't go downhill hardly at all before we switch onto the slopes of the Glibier.
Yeah, there's
In fact, only 70 seconds across the board here. This is low. Burkhardt, who fell back, is falling back now and going on again. Contador is another acceleration from the champion of Spain, and he's looking to see, has this one hurt anyone? And it looks as though it might have hurt Voeckler.
And Cadel Evans has gone off the back because of that acceleration by the Spaniard. Now, all of a sudden, Cadel Evans, Phil, is up against the ropes.
Well, we'll take a look at that now. Cadel Evans is definitely feeling the pain of yesterday's chase when he was left alone.
He's got something
wrong with his bike, surely. He's rocking all over the road, Cadel Evans. He's got a bike problem.
Well, there's something wrong with his machine there. Just checking the back wheel. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with Cadel. He's back onto the machine. And at this point, Phil, the team cars won't have come up alongside him. That's the neutral service mechanic there, giving him a push, getting him back into the race.
Well, for the Australians, this is heart-stopping stuff now. Cadel Evans didn't understand what was wrong with his bike. Didn't look as though there was anything wrong, and there's the kangaroo to cheer him on. Tomo Voeckler here will want Cadel Evans to come back and give him another shot. But what an incredible acceleration by Alberto Contador, and Schlecker's gone with him, of course.
Well, Phil, at the start of this Tour de France, we talked about a duel between...
he stopped again. It's a gear problem.
Well, Che was tightening up the back wheel there. Marcus Burkhardt has come up to him, and he's going to do whatever he can to try... No, they're different. I don't think
he'd ride the bike of Burkhardt.
No,
Burkhardt now is waiting to try and pace him back up here now, as Cadel Evans has got his back wheel. That's the sort of blow he does not need in this most critical day on the Tour de France, and I would say the most critical stage of the Tour so far.
Well, I tell you what, Phil, that was very unfortunate for him, but I tell you what, I think his legs were hurting him first before he had the mechanical problem with his bike. But this is an incredible piece of work by Alberto Contador. Before the start of the Tour de France, we talked about a duel between 2 men, Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck. Well, it's actually finally coming to roost.
Well, Tommy Voeckler is down there in front of the race official's car as we look back down the road, spread out here. There's a lot of riders coming back from the breakaway, don't forget now, as we get in amongst it with Contador and Schleck. Now he's off again, and he's losing valuable time here. Whatever is wrong with that bike is now dumped on the roadside. The team car has now found him, and he's back in the action.
Well, the only one positive thing I can take out of this at all is the fact that he's got Marcus Burkhardt with him, and Burkhardt should be able to survive with Cadel Evans over the top of this climb, and he can help him make a daredevil descent down the other side and see whether or not he can get himself back into this bike race this afternoon.
Well, looking at the way he's got back into the action accelerated, it's not his body that's wrong. It was a bike problem, and now he's got to get back, and he's got to form an alliance for a while at least with Thomas Voeckler, who is still struggling behind Contador and Schleck.
Well, that's an amazing piece of acceleration. This guy now has really got to find some special courage today, Thomas Voeckler. He was incredible in the way that he rode across the gap once he saw Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck going clear. But I think this may well be the bridge just a little bit too far for Thomas Voeckler this afternoon. When I saw him interviewed after the finish yesterday, you could see in his eyes the fatigue that was there after the days that he spent pulling himself inside out to keep that yellow jersey on his shoulders.
Contador's come up here behind Iglinski, the hero of the early climbs yesterday when he won them all. He's still towing now Andy Schleck up to the leaders.
Well, let me tell you one thing. It's a funny old thing, the sport of professional cycling. Turn the clock back 12 months. Maxime Iglinski was on the same team as Alberto Contador last year.
Comes up on the back wheel of his old teammate then, as he now lines up now. Fletcher's just taking a look to his right, and he's seen Contador in amongst the leaders. How is this happening? Voeckler here is going to get all the cheers for sure, but he really went into his red zone to hold on, and that last attack by Contador he could not cope with at all.
of the Col de Telegraph. Then some respite for this leading group of riders as they drop down into the town of Valois. But just looking at this way this race is unfolding, Phil, Alberto Contador could be winning the Tour de France for Andy Schleck this afternoon, because the difference in time between Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck is 4.5 minutes, and I don't think he can pull that back in a 40-kilometre time trial.
He has got to get a couple of minutes off him on the climb to Alpe d'Huez, and who knows how long this man can resist at the moment. Voigtler is looking too much over his shoulder, a sign that he may well be falling back. Andy Schleck's going to the top of the Col de Galibier now, first category climb, with I think there's 10 points available at the top. He could be moving into the lead in the King of the Mountains competition.
I'm not sure he's thinking about that, Phil. I think he's thinking about a yellow jersey at the end of the day, and if he can pick up the polka dot jersey along the route, thank you very much, that's a bonus prize.
A great effort by Thomas Voigtler. His face is telling the story now. His Tour de France as a leader has ended right here, I think, as he'll fall slowly back. They've stopped giving us a time check on him now. He's with Jerome Pinot at the moment of Quick-Step, but just under 1 mile to the top, 1.6 kilometers. Contador has gone from the back to the front, blown out Cadel Evans with a mechanical, blown out Frank Schleck with leg problems, and he's now towing Andy Schleck to the summit. Well, we're just coming up over the summit of the Col du Telegraph at the moment here, as there's Izagirre, it looks like, who's gone through in first place. No attempt by Andy Schleck to take the maximum points, and automatically the lead in the King of the Mountains. It looks like Schleck's had a word there with Izagirre about that. So as Contador resumes at the front, and it looks as though Schleck wasn't too pleased with the actions there of the first place by Izagirre. Schleck got second. He gets 8 points for that, so he has moved into the lead in the King of the Mountains anyway. Now we've got 33 seconds back to Alberto Contador. Now Voigtler is saying here, go with me and get ready for a very quick descent down here, as Jerome Pinot zips up his racing jersey, and Voigtler wants back in that group.
I think he's also saying thanks very much for pacing me up to the summit of this climb, because I went through an extremely bad patch there. It's in total 4.5 kilometers from the Telegraph to the middle of the town of Valois, and there's a couple of tricky little descents, so I would expect to see the descent being made by Thomas Voigtler to try and get back to Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck.
Yeah, with Schleck winning and Contador second, they were rather unhappy that Izagirre made the effort to beat them when they made all of the effort on the climb, I think. That's probably what Schleck was saying. Now this is the chase, they're settling back in now. There's a spread here, there's still a gap which hasn't come up on our screens at the moment to the main head of the race, but I think it's about 34 seconds to Voigtler. Contador getting some food. This is the peloton, they've just come over the top of the climb at the moment. And at the back of that little bunch there, it's quite a big bunch actually, is Philippe Gilbert. Now just have a look at this. Contador has got himself back into the action. Just looking around, he now wants Andy Schleck to come round him and do some sharing of the pace back. But nobody wants to know. I mean, they're all frightened of Alberto Contador on the way up the hill. Contador says, oh, no helpers, I better get on with the job here. Well, he's advertised the fact he wants to push on today. He's got rid of 2 of his rivals in Frank Schleck and Cadel Evans, and if he can just continue like this, he will be sitting second tonight. Faces of the riders now as they start the climb of the Col de Galibier, this giant col of 16.7 kilometers. Johnny Hugelin, the first rider to drop away from the back as they hit the slopes now, Paul. Now, just what is Contador thinking of on this climb after what he's done on the Telegraph?
This climb is a lot more difficult now, because once you get up to the summit, you're getting almost to 10% gradients. Those are the kind of gradients that Alberto Contador really appreciates. It's on those climbs that his acceleration can be much more useful. A lot of chatting going on in the group, Phil, I have to say, between the Spanish-speaking riders, and I think Alberto Contador will be looking for some allies.
Well, the riders here, as they know, it's a long way to the top. The gap to Voigtler is 25 seconds. He hasn't really caught up at all. And 1:33 to the group containing Cadel Evans. These are time gaps with so far to go that has got to concern Cadel, of course, as the breakaway itself now has been joined here by Fletcher, who's coming back from the front
Well, I'll tell you what, Phil, if you want to talk about a bit of defiance, that is defiance written all over the face of Thomas Voeckler there. You might just have noticed in front of him, he could see the yellow car, the neutral service vehicle. Well, it's that car right there. He's looking at 25 seconds, 27 seconds.
Yep.
He's still locked in. He's riding at the same pace as Alberto Contador, which is absolutely phenomenal.
Well,
Style, Phil, he looks laboured, he looks as if he's having a real hard time, but he's actually looking at that yellow car behind the leading group of riders thinking, that's what I want to get to, and that's what he's battling for.
It is amazing. He's almost can reach that car in front. It's agonizing. Halfway across the gap would mean he would be back as the leader of the Tour, but at the moment he's out of the race lead by 16 seconds. They're trying to reorganize things. This is the back of Robert Hessing here, and it looks as though Hessing, a one-time favourite for the Tour, is once again in trouble in the mountains.
Well, he's had a very difficult first week. Like many riders in the Tour, he had bad crashes, and it's up to now Cadel Evans' team to come forward and do the pacemaking. I just spotted big George Hincapie coming up there. He's been in situations like this before. He knows exactly what he has to do, and he will set the tempo for as long as he can on this climb. But the gap, Phil, is a massive, currently 1 minute 38 seconds gap back to the main field.
Be happy when they see Christophe Riblin dispatched back to the pack, because he's on the team nearest to them. And I think it won't be long before that happens. Look at this now. Evans tried to team time trial away. Basso tried to organise his Liquigas Cannondale.
Just get an idea there as they come around that corner just how steep it is in the corners on some of these cols. While we look at a gradient of 8 to 9%, these guys are now getting to the smallest gears that they've got on their machines. A 39-tooth chainring on the inside and probably 25 or 26-tooth sprocket on the back.
Well, you saw the flag picking up that tailwind, which was a headwind yesterday, because they come up the other side of the Galibier today. Still over 3 miles to go to the summit. Gorka Izagirre has dropped off from the back wheel of the yellow jersey. As he continues his lone furrow to the top, he looks across the valley there to see, is he catching them or not? And the answer is not, because it's now officially 44 seconds back.
Well, Voeckler still concentrated. He's slipping back all of the time, Phil. The main field are at 1 minute and 47 seconds, and they are really not pulling anything at all back. Their big chance, I would think, will be once we go over the summit of the Col de Galibier, because we've got 45 to 50 kilometres of downhill to Bourg d'Oisans.
It is, the catch has come very, very quickly. So quickly, you must ask yourself the question, has this been the mountain which has cracked Tommy Voeckler?
Well, it certainly has, and the man who cracked him was not Andy Schleck. In fact, it was Alberto Contador, and he's almost at a standstill there on the left-hand side. He's going to wait and try and get himself back into this pack. But now we're going to see, Phil, a long chase by Cadel Evans, and will he, once he goes over the top of this climb, find any friends at all in the Tour de France today?
Well, Evans has got to keep on picking up. He'll take some heart by the fact that he's come up alongside the yellow jersey. He's just got to grit his teeth and grind on. He's got Frank Schleck on his back wheel. He'll have to take him with him if that's the way it's going to be, because he's got to get back on terms with Andy Schleck. He's still got time in hand over Alberto Contador.
Well, this I've never seen racing like this, I don't think, ever, Phil. We're now looking at possibly the next man to crack here, number 91, 6th overall at the start of the day, and Ivan Basso is in difficulty.
And that wasn't supposed to be the plan at all. Basso, I thought, was able to help Cadel Evans. Now he is in difficulty. In the last 3 kilometres, that was a big peloton, which has been more than halved in size now as they've got to the real steep part of the Galibier. And Basso trying to keep hands on here, and his faithful man in front of him is still Sylvester Schmidt.
Well, Vincent Gérôme slipping backwards for Europe car. Pierre Rolland is in that group, and Anthony Charteau as well. They will probably, once they get over the summit, if they survive in this group, start to organise, I think, with Cadel Evans, because for Thomas Voeckler, it's also a race today for the possibility of a podium finish in Paris.
As regards the Galibier, and an attack by Cadel Evans has done this to the Maillot Jaune. They have dropped Thomas Voeckler from the chase group. I think we can show you the attack. This is it. Came on the right of the road in the wake of Samuel Sanchez moving clear. There was a reaction from Anthony Charteau here in the dark glasses at the front, but what they didn't know was that the teammates of Voeckler see in the distance Thomas Voeckler dropping off the back. Now the teammates have had to reorganise and go back and help him here. They've dropped back to try and bring him up, but take a look now at Cadel Evans. They're only 51 seconds behind the leaders. This is the counter. 51 seconds behind the leaders now. Cadel Evans has put in his counter move again on the hardest part, and this man started it. He provided the attraction for Evans. Here comes Cadel Evans now. The gap is beginning to tumble.
Well, Cadel Evans has split the group and they're scrambling, trying to come across that gap. Ryder Hagedal over on the right-hand side in the blue helmet is trying to pace Tommy Danielson back up to this group to keep Danielson up in the top 10. This is why, Phil, I question the move of Thomas Voeckler riding so hard halfway across that gap. He put a lot of effort in to try and stay at 30 seconds to those four leaders. It's a hard thing to do, and it's a tall order. Now he's paying for it.
Well, that was Samuel Sanchez go round. Now Cadel Evans goes round, and Frank Schleck's hooked up to the back of that little threesome there. If they go over the top here inside a minute, and it's quite likely they will right now, 50 seconds is the time gap, then they've got 50 kilometres to chase back to those leaders on the way down to Bourg d'Oisans. Then we will have the final showdown on Alpe d'Huez itself.
It's a crazy day, this, in the Tour, to make a move like that on the first climb of the day by Alberto Contador. He's ripped the Tour de France to pieces this afternoon, and it's all because of the fact that he wanted to ride himself back into the Tour. He doesn't care whether he finishes 7th or 9th or 10th. What he's trying to do is get himself onto the podium in Paris.
Well, these steeper final slopes of the Galibier are really now hurting Alberto Contador. He has looked good until just now, and I think Andy Schleck may have spotted that, and he knows there is a reaction behind. He keeps trying to catch a glimpse of who is chasing, but he'll know it'll be Evans for sure. Contador does the same. The other two have not helped at all here, Rui Costa and Christophe Reblon. They're just waiting to see. Now they know once they're over the top, and they're not far from the summit now. One good thing is he will increase his lead in the King of the Mountains, and this at the end of this day will mean he'll probably win the King of the Mountains.
Well, that's the important.
Frank is getting up to Bro Andy.
Well, they've toughened the race up once again, in difficulty, in distress this afternoon. Ivan Basso as we go to the top of the climb, and there we go. Andy Schleck goes over him first, Contador in second.
And that will probably give him a victory in the King of the Mountains competition, but we won't presume that just yet. But Schleck goes over the top, and Alberto Contador didn't look quite so good in the last kilometre of that climb as he's done all day. The brief trip through the tunnel here, which keeps it the slightly lower level of where we were yesterday. We're only at 2,556 metres today.
Oh, that's quite cheap. We've been robbed of another 100 metres, but I don't think these riders will be too concerned about that. They'll be extremely happy. Irish flag flying on the right-hand side there as we wait for the riders to come out of the dark into the sunshine and then start that very long descent. Cadel Evans is pulling himself, Phil, back into the Tour de France today.
Well, our French television keeping with the leaders here, but Evans is over the summit, and no final time gap. It looks as though 44 seconds is what we think they've topped the summit in. This is a picture of Thomas Voeckler, two teammates staying with him. And what on earth was wrong with that bottle?
I'm not quite sure about that. I think he's having a little bit of a hard time here this afternoon. As we can see, so too is Ivan Basso. Further down the slopes there, Levi Leipheimer has pulled himself back up to the wheel of Thomas Voeckler, and he's got three teammates with him now. They've all been pulled back, Phil, to quite possibly try and pace him up to the group. There's Christian van der Velde.
There's Christian van der Velde. Most important, that the third counter in the team race for Garmin Cervelo here. So they're still doing a great operation here with two riders in the next group. It's a spread of 1 minute 36, and look at Voeckler, just use his whole body to get over. Now he is a good descender. As we start the descent now from the line just below the clouds, we're now diving to the valley. It is a ride of over 50 kilometers downhill, and then the only way is up the Alpe d'Huez. Alberto Contador sits at the back of these four leaders here. They've begun their way down the Col de Galibier. If the roads look familiar, they should. The riders came up them yesterday to summit out the finish of yesterday's stage. And he wasn't freewheeling quite like that yesterday, was he? And that is Andy Schleck on the way down, getting as much as he can out of that bike without making the effort.
Well, most of these riders will know this descent because they actually rode back down it last night after the race finished. Schleck taking a few risks going around these corners. Schleck didn't ride down after the finish yesterday, Phil, because he stayed at the top of the mount until about 7:30, having to wait to provide a medical sample for the doping control. Thomas Voeckler, quite clever, came down with one of the motorbikes from the newspaper L'Equipe to get himself off the top of the mountain down to his team bus as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well, sometimes those little favours are very specially reserved for French riders, especially if you lead the Tour de France. There is now the chase back. This is Cadel Evans here in the centre of our picture. He's got to make the descent of his life now. He's got a bridge, according to our computer, 28 seconds to catch up with those four leaders. And I cannot see those four leaders holding off Cadel Evans now. Tom Danielson is in a group of riders, the best placed American rider, of some 7 riders, including Frank Schleck. And they are chasing down. We've got no time on them just now. The next group we have a time on is the yellow jersey at 1:42.
Well, I'll tell you what, Phil, the way this race has unfolded so far, if it all does come back together, it's going to be a massive sort-out on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez. It's going to be the last man standing, I think, who wins the Tour de France here this afternoon.
It has been all for one and one for all. It has been a terrific Tour de France. All of the favourites advertising their strength and always coming back together. Look at this now, Contador, absolutely superb in descent. Holds the middle of the handlebars. Now he reaches for those brakes as he leans into the corner and swings right. A lot of criticism on how these riders descend, especially coming to us from motorcyclists and racing car drivers. They never seem to line up correctly for the corners.
Well, the way to do it is to move over to the far side and then cut right across the apex of the corner. But the problem is, on a lot of these descents, Phil, some of the corners come too quickly for you to actually line up properly to get into the next corner that comes up.
Well, apparently, if you can't see the other side when you go in, and it's tight. As the riders now, 5 of them go down together. They must know the chase is on. It's 29 seconds to these 4 riders here as they continue the descent. In fact, they've been joined, I think, by the chase group of Frank Schleck. And Cunego is there now, Pierre Roland and Tommy Danielson. They've got into the Evans group.
Well, looks like Ryder Hezjedal is the man making the descent there. Cadel Evans going round that corner, sweeping right over to the outside of the line. He's trying to get himself onto the wheel of the Canadian, who is really ripping up this road.
8 riders in that group. Maybe Tommy D hasn't crossed the gap yet. It is Sanchez is there, Hezjedal is there, Evans is there. Some riders from the chase group have got a gap. We should see them coming round to the right of our picture. No, we haven't. So that gap is opening up a little bit.
Well, Contador getting himself down into an aerodynamic tuck there to keep the pace as high as possible. What an incredible backdrop of the Alps here this afternoon. The Tour de France wanted to celebrate 100 years in the Alps, of the inclusion of the Alps in the Tour. And what 2 days of racing we've really had.
In those 100 years, first of all, we had the advent of television, and now we've got the advent of high-definition pictures, and the country has never looked better here as the cyclists in the modern-day Tour de France course through the mountains here at speeds up to 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, around the corner there. He's not going to lay down arms at all, Alberto Contador, here this afternoon, because he knows he's got to put the hammer down today. That was an incredible move to write his name down into the history books, but it doesn't actually right now appear to be working, because I've got an unofficial time gap of around about 18 seconds back to Cadel Evans's group.
Yes, but they say that Hezjedal and Evans is with Sanchez, and that didn't look like the case here, because this is Sanchez right now. So this is Sanchez here. The computer says Hezjedal and Evans are riding with him. Maybe he's behind the camera, because here comes Evans right now, and Hezjedal should be with Cadel. Then we've got Tommy Danielson just behind. This is a desperate chase off the Col de Galibier, the last high mountain of the Tour, but not the last hardest, because Alpe d'Huez is still to come. If these boys regroup in what is the next hour of descending, it'll be a great showdown at the OK of the Alpe d'Huez. See you in a minute. All the way, he still treasures hopes of rejoining the side of those leaders. This is the man who should get to them first. Samuel Sanchez looking right ahead there. Those cars are just behind that leading group of 4. Officially, that gap is 12 seconds. Then you only need to look back 21 seconds, and you will see that group containing Frank Schleck, Danielson, Hezjedal and Evans. It is amazing now, the situation that everybody chasing, except Contador and Schleck, who are out in that front group.
Well, we're talking 11 seconds, the gap to Sammy Sanchez. A couple more corners, Phil, and he should be there. There's the yellow neutral service vehicle. He's on the back of the motorbikes. Those motorbikes are the information motorbikes, so they give the race information out on the radio to the referees, and then it gets sent out to all of the team cars. They're just around the corner. We're looking to see whether the junction is going to be made, and it should be made very shortly. Sammy Sanchez is a great descender, and all of a sudden he might prove to be a very good ally for Alberto Contador in this leading group of 5. Cadel Evans is still looking at around about 22 seconds.
Well, this is an excellent move by the Olympic champion Samuel Sanchez. You saw the speed he went round that motorbike. He just came out of the hole in the wall. He's now free to fly. They pulled all the cars away from the leaders. They will make the rider have to work to cross the void himself. No attractions of following vehicles, but it won't be a problem now. He's going to freewheel up. Now Sanchez is going to get across. What about the 9 riders who have grouped behind at 38 seconds?
They're actually losing time. They've got to 22. It's stretched out now to 38 seconds, but Cadel Evans is now finding some riders in that group who are prepared to help, and of course one of those is Sandy Cassar, who's having an incredible ride today. He's such an up and down rider, Cassar. He's trying to protect his own teammate Arnaud Jonazon, who's looking to move up in the Best Young Rider competition.
Well, while they've got Rein Taramay, the current leader in the Best Young Rider competition, those are riders who are under 25 on the 1st of January 1986. He's off the back. Have they got Keremaya in this group?
Now, Pierre Rolland is in the group. He's actually the man who will look to inherit the overall lead, I would have to say.
As they continue to make the move down here, there's 2 riders in the chase. This is the Cadel Evans chase group, still being pegged at 38 seconds. Sanchez has not got on just yet. It may be better if he doesn't until this group gets a little bit closer to the action. This is the chase group here of Cadel Evans. There's 9 riders down there. Let's go back into the Leopard Trek and we can check in on the car cam in there, see what. Don't forget, as we watch all the action here, Cadel Evans now pointed at 31 seconds. They've got to continue chasing. Log on to NBCSports.com/podium every day during the tour for your chance to win a trip for 2 to the 2012 Tour de France and a Cervelo S5 bike. Also win a clean bottle and Giro helmet, and today's code word is switchbacks. Now it's a group of 5, Contador, Schleck, Sanchez, Costa, Reblon at the front, being chased by a group of 9, which includes Cadel Evans and the Garmin Cervelo riders, Tommy Danielson and Ryder Hagedal, and also a man who's trying to get up there for the new white jersey, and that's Pierre Rolland, who is the next logical candidate behind Rein Taramay, who has been dropped on the way up today. It's going to be the 26, Ivan Basso is trying to whip up the chase there and join up. It is an incredible spread, but it's no longer closing. They seem to all be pegged.
It's all a question of survival now, and we're looking at 31 kilometers to go. That's 18 miles of racing, and the last 13.5 kilometers or 8-mile racing is right up the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez. Another one of these incredible waterfalls in this part of the world. Some of them are extremely high, and this one is about 400 meters down.
We passed it last night driving here. It's crashing way down. All the rocks have been smoothed out over hundreds of years of that cascade coming out of the waterfall from the top of the mountain. So as we look down the valley now, we pass that waterfall on the right shoulder of the riders. We continue now. We're 31 kilometers from the finish. We start climbing the Alp. 14 kilometers to go. They've got to close it all down before then. See you in a moment. Still those 5 leaders, but the chase, which contains Tommy Danielson and Ryder Hagedal, is now only 18 seconds behind them. These are the 5 leaders going to the little chicane here as we cross over the Chambon Lake and then flick to the right as they continue to descend. This is the chase behind. Sandy Cassar leads it at the moment. Evans in 2nd place. Ryder Hagedal. Tommy Danielson is here as well. It is incredible, but they know they're desperate now. It's just dropped to 13 seconds. As I speak, they're closing in rapidly. They're going for the left turn. Well, there they are, Paul, making the same left turn around the back of the Chambon Lake here. And 13 seconds is the official time gap. And also, 1:32, Voigtler's group is coming back as well.
It could be a very strange situation, Phil, where you see the whole of the race come back together just in the final kilometers before the start of the Alpe d'Huez. 13 seconds. It's a hard chase being put in by the group with Cadel Evans, Sandy Cassar and the rest. And the man, I have to keep telling you this, the man who's having the easiest ride of the day is Frank Schleck, sitting there nice and comfortable as you please.
And Frank would be the logical candidate to launch an attack, and Cadel would have to follow it. Frank remains a big danger here. As we continue in, he's only 4 seconds better on the overall than Cadel Evans, so he's really got to follow each other wherever they go. But first of all, let's do the one problem at a time. Evans has got to catch up with the leaders. And these are the leaders, and they look as though they're a little bit disorganized now because Sanchez has eased off the back here with Rui Costa.
Well, he's just
10 seconds, they're saying now. They must be in sight.
They must be. Well, they are in sight. They're in the same straight. There are the leaders, and they're just around the corner now. In the next kilometre or so, it will all come back together, and we will end up now with a 14-man leading group.
And it's taken an awful long time and 1.5 mountains for Cadel Evans to repair the time he incurred by changing his bicycle on the Col du Telegraph. There he is now, he's braking hard, looking a bit relaxed at the moment, a full hairpin bend here.
Well, that's what they're looking at, and there's around the corner. You can see that that chasing group of 9 riders. They are waiting to make the contact, and what a long chase that has been. And this has been an extremely difficult day, and it really is now, I think, Phil, setting up to be a survival of the fittest on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez, because everyone has had an extremely hard day of racing. It
is setting up to be one of the most fantastic climbs. I think they've climbed Alpe d'Huez 26 times in history. I've seen 25 finishes. I was a bit too young, even I was, for the time when Fausto Coppi won on top in 1952. But now we are going to see one of the very, very best, and they will perform in front of their crowd on Alpe d'Huez today. Massive crowd. It's 4 seconds. They're clawing their way back into the race. Soon we will have 14 leaders, and the only man missing will be the maillot jaune of Thomas Voeckler. 25 kilometers to go. That's for the leaders. Take a look over your shoulder because the other 9 are right there.
Almost. There's Cadel Evans coming around that corner. Under 25 kilometers to go now. It's about 3 seconds the difference. Andy Schleck will sit up. It's 10 kilometers, by the way, to the sprint point of the day. And there you can see Ryder Hegedal is the man just pulling it all back together. Now, has Andy Schleck recovered from the efforts of yesterday? And how good is Frank Schleck going to be when we come up to the start of the Alpe d'Huez?
Riblon wants something from his team car. You probably saw Andy Schleck crane his neck. He's looking for brother Frank. Frank is there just behind him now. They've decided to call for drinks because at the moment they've called a truce now. They've made them work to catch up. They've caught up, so now they want to change their drinking bottles. And it looks like Rui Costa is pushing on.
Well, once this regrouping has happened, we're going to see a little bit of a slowing down. The average speed as those riders take on board drinks could quite possibly allow Thomas Voeckler to come back to the main field.
Well, one thing is for sure, whoever wins the Tour de France on Sunday will know he's been in a bike race and has had to work for it. We are now 24 kilometers from the finish. We are 10 kilometers from the start of this incredible climb, which they call Alpe d'Huez, and it's 21 corners. We'll take a break on 400 meters from the sprint for the green jersey. It doesn't matter to these riders at all because we're now heading towards Alpe d'Huez. In just a kilometer, they will make the turn and head up the mountain, and then the battle be on. Ryder Hegedal, Pierre Rolland are the riders who are now heading the charge. And don't forget, today's commercial free is brought to you by Nissan and the 100% electric Nissan Leaf. Here we go, under the banner, the race starts now. The battle for the stage win and the battle behind as to who wins the Tour de France on Sunday. Hegedal gets the most points there. So no sprint, not to be expected, or to be expected rather, Paul. Ryder Hegedal and the peloton behind. This is the chase group, but as they come through, it looks as though the yellow jersey is rejoined at 15 to go.
Well, it's going to be, as I said earlier, Phil, I think last man standing wins the Tour de France here this afternoon. Cadel Evans knows what he has to do on the final climb of the day. He's got to keep a very close eye on Frank and Andy Schleck, and he knows that. He knows how much time he can pull back on them in the individual time trial. But has Frank Schleck got anything left in the legs to go for the big attack, to try and prize open an advantage over Evans?
Well, no sprinters involved in the sprint there, so we don't need to worry about the green jersey competition. Now this is the battle for who takes the yellow home after Sunday as we come into this beautiful town or in the Oison area of France, Bourg d'Oison, and then we will start the climb of Alpe d'Huez. 52 seconds is the gap now. Hegedal and Rolland have taken the chance, the opportunist moves, and that is a very, very good move.
Well, third, fourth and fifth, as you can see, these are the riders halfway across the gap, and they are Jonazon in there as well with them, with Jonazon.
Costa. Now this is it. Look at the crowd here. There's the sign, 13.8. The finish line sits atop Alpe d'Huez. This is the climb that has seen so many of the big names in the sport of cycling seal their victories. Names like Greg LeMond, Bernardino, Lance Armstrong, you name them. When they've got to the top of this mountain, they've seen Paris in yellow. And now we've got a Canadian, the only Canadian in the race. And amazingly, Paul, there are hundreds of Canadian people on the top today. We met most of them last night. And that Ryder Hesjedal now is in a perfect position with Pierre Rolland to go for the stage win. Not the Tour win, but the stage win. And that is a big deal.
And that's what he's looking for. He finished third on the road into Gap behind his own teammate. An integral part of that victory for Garmin Cervelo on that occasion. The scariest part of Alpe d'Huez, Phil, is when you come around this corner, then all of a sudden you look up, it's a straight wall in front of you. It kicks up to around about 12%, and it is very scary, especially if you're a non-climber.
Anthony Charteau on the right with the maillot jaune. It's a rather tight fit on these lower slopes, and these early slopes are very, very hard. A massive, massive crowd as BMC. This is like the old days when Lance Armstrong was launched by his team onto the top of the climb. But BMC have been quickly pushed out of the way now.
Well, this is Fuglsang coming to the front. He's had a pretty easy ride as well. He's been in a number of groups out on the course as we're trying to see BMC place Cadel Evans, and Cadel Evans has got himself the gap, because where is everybody else?
Well, they're all stretched out on the climbs here. They're trying to scramble through the gaps. There's Andy Schleck there. Voigtler has gone after Andy Schleck. I'm sure this man cannot have any more strength left in those legs. The flag of South Africa flies over the race. There are no South Africans, sadly, in the Tour this year. Even the devil is learning to sprint as we start the climb of Alpe d'Huez.
Carlos Barredo covers there. You've got the Schleck brothers now coming across number 11. Andy Schleck, did he put too much in yesterday and today in that incredible move of his? Cadel Evans taking responsibility here as he looks over his shoulder. He's ridden alone on a number of occasions. He's come right up to Fuglsang. He was beaten on this slope a few years ago by Carlos Sastre, who put a massive big attack in, and Cadel Evans now has got that big diesel engine in full swing.
Now every corner is named. Every corner tells you where you are and how high you've climbed. Every hairpin bend, there are 21. These riders will have lost count after the first two. The concentration now. Cadel Evans knows he's got to ride. He's got to keep his eye on two riders, Andy and Frank Schleck, as he rides now for Australia's first victory. It looks as though the yellow jersey, although he came back with an incredible chase, is now slipping through the pack.
Well, we've got an organisation of Leopard Trek on the front. Fuglsang is trying to do the work for Andy Schleck and Frank Schleck. They want to pace him back slowly up to the back wheel of Cadel Evans. But as I said earlier today, Phil, I think the best form of defence for Cadel Evans is attack.
And Christophe Ribland, the rider who tried to go for it, has slipped off the back. Now Evans is pushing on here. The Schlecks are being put on the defensive. Fuglsang is trying to keep them in touch. Is this the move where Cadel Evans gets his revenge after 2 days of facing the attacks from Andy Schleck?
Well, it's what Cadel Evans needs to do now, and that's a great show of defiance by him after all of the hard work he did pretty much on his own yesterday over the final 11.5 kilometres. He took the responsibility. Rein Terme, best young rider at the start of the day. I think that's going to disappear and go onto the shoulders of Pierre Rolland by tonight. Who
is still in the lead, let us not forget, riding with the Canadian rider, Ryder Hesjedal. But this now is Cadel Evans, and coming up alongside him, Fuglsang is bringing up the two boys, Andy Schleck and Frank Schleck, and sat behind, a little bit quieter now, is Contador himself.
Well, damage is being done all over this race, and all of a sudden we're looking at the control of the team Leopard Trek. They've pulled themselves back to Cadel Evans, but where's Alberto Contador? He's still got a couple of teammates in this group. I would think he's hidden in the middle there in the yellow glasses.
Sitting and waiting, and now Fuglsang, how long can he set the pace here? What is Andy Schleck thinking after that long attack when it looked as though they were riding away from Cadel? They outpaced him over the Galibier. Now watch to the left of your picture, because here we go. Will there be an immediate reaction after Alberto Contador? Because he's lost nearly 5 minutes in the Tour de France, and it is only 12 kilometres to go. Fuglsang has lifted the tempo.
Fuglsang has got Andy Schleck on his wheel, and he's riding slowly across the gap. The reaction is coming, though, from Cadel Evans, who's seen this as a danger point. He's only going to follow one man. He's not really concerned about Alberto Contador. He's got a pretty good buffer over him in the standings, but he does have to make sure he keeps in contact with Andy Schleck. There he is. The Australian is locked onto the wheel of Schleck.
The determination of Contador, who wants some consolation from the Tour, and victory at the top of the Alp would be major consolation for the three-time winner. And you know, I'm not so sure Andy Schleck has got it right now. Cadel Evans has locked into him.
Well, Cadel Evans is locked right onto the wheel there of Schleck. That's all he's going to look for as we look at the damage this race is doing now. It's all come down to the Alpe d'Huez once again.
What a race on Alpe d'Huez here. The defending champion refuses to go out of the television screen and die gracefully. He's fighting his way back. He's too far behind, we think, to win the Tour de France. If he wins by minutes at the top, he might take his time back in the time trial. And that's a pure climber, Paul, the way he accelerates.
Reminds me a little bit of the move that was made by a certain rider from Spain called Carlos Sastre. He laid down the foundations on the Alpe d'Huez of his overall victory, and he needs to take back serious time here, Phil. I reckon he needs to take back a couple of minutes. That is possible by a man like that.
Well, when you open a gap like that with one kick of the pedals, and remember, Contador came out with a plan today which was from the gun to attack the riders. They weren't expecting it. Andy Schleck read it well. Cadel Evans was in mechanical trouble. They've all come back together for the Battle of Alpe d'Huez. What a day this is going to be. And now he's gone out of sight around the hairpin bends as we look at Andy Schleck with sitting in his slipstream. Cadel Evans, overall Cadel Evans is 57 seconds behind Andy Schleck. That's enough for him if he gets it to the time trial. The battle at the front is for the white jersey and a Canadian stage win.
Well, rider Hagedal and Pierre Rolland look across and say, wow, this is Alberto Contador. He's come straight across the gap to us. Contador is looking for huge time this afternoon. He's also looking for some glory as well. Andy Schleck is concentrated. He knows what he has to do. He has to try and get time between himself and Cadel Evans. But after being up the front of this race for such a long time today and yesterday, I'm not sure he's got the giclette or the attack to get rid of Evans on this climb.
Another hairpin bend coming up. It's a shame we can't see the names because the plaques are all there, and there will be a Frank Schleck bend, of course, as Contador has caught the men who started the moves now, and Pierre Rolland grits his teeth. This guy's a real man for the future. He's only a youngster. As he grits his teeth now, he knows there's a white jersey waiting for him at the top, and that's the way it would go all the way to Paris. This is decision day in the Tour de France. Andy Schleck's probably the king of the mountains. The white jersey could be Pierre Rolland. Garmin Sabello could be the team captains. Meanwhile, this is the scene on the climb. Who's going to win the yellow?
Well, that's the big question at the end of this afternoon, Phil. Cadel Evans just locked onto that wheel now. He's in a very comfortable situation. All he has to do is really watch Andy Schleck, but he needs to keep a very close eye on the time that Alberto Contador might be able to pull back in this race, because Alberto Contador started the day 4:44 behind Thomas Voeckler, but more importantly, he was about 3 minutes behind Cadel Evans.
4:44 behind Voeckler, who is no longer now, so it's 4:29 he is behind Andy Schleck, and that's the important time gap. And then you add on a further minute, so he's 5 minutes or so, 3 minutes or something ahead of Cadel Evans, that's all. And look at him now. This is the man we've seen win the Tour de France 3 times, riding just like this. Pierre Rolland grits his teeth. He won't give up as he stares at the Norwegian flags. What an incredible tour they've had this year. But now this is about the pass winner versus the other boys who wants his crown.
Well, Phil, at the start of the day, there was a 3-minute 32 gap between Cadel Evans and Alberto Contador. Now, if he goes crazy on this climb and he pulls out a minute and a half or 2 minutes, he could put himself back into the Tour de France this afternoon in the time trial tomorrow.
And no one would have thought that was possible at all. The face of Andy Schleck as he now tries to get rid of Cadel Evans. Evans rides in his slipstream without any problem as he continues up the lower slopes of the climb. Evans does not look in any trouble here, and he may find, if the gap does open, he may have to attack Andy Schleck and steal back seconds off him and close down seconds on Contador.
Well, this is going to be a huge battle. It looks like finally it's a climb too far for Thomas Voeckler, who eventually, after his own predictions, is losing his overall lead in the Tour this afternoon.
10.9 kilometers to go at the moment as we continue on the climb. And just to remind you that today's commercial free is brought to you by Nissan and the 100% electric Nissan Leaf. And Contador
He's getting into that zone now, and he's really all of a sudden bounced back in the Tour de France this afternoon, Phil. 30 seconds is the gap that he's got over Schleck and Evans, and he's looking like for a very likely leader, very likely winner of the stage here this afternoon.
Which would be not inconsiderable consolation for the former champion of Spain and the 3 times winner of the Tour de France and the emphatic winner of this year's Giro d'Italia. They now pass under that same 10-kilometre banner. Life's getting a bit complex in the pack here in the race for second place, though, that's for sure. And Evans won't panic. He will be told by his team car the time gaps. He will know exactly where Contador is, as will Andy Schleck. So they're going to hold themselves, because this levels out in the middle as Contador is on the top corner there. And now what's happening? A little tester?
Well, Frank Schleck's having a go now, immediately covered by Cadel Evans, moving up into 3rd position. Andy Schleck, this was what we expected to come, but I think as soon as he sees Cadel Evans there, he'll sit up, and maybe we'll see another counter move coming from Andy.
This is one Schleck sandwich that's going to give them indigestion, because Cadel Evans is marking both of them right now, and he still does not look like a man under pressure. They are using what energy they have left after a week in the Alps to try and dump the Australian, and I'm not sure they can. This man who's lost too much time for the moment to win the Tour de France, but that is a temporary situation. Ask me in another 20 minutes, he might be out to win the Tour de France.
Well, he could be. He's not looking comfortable. He doesn't look like he's enjoying this. It's not the fluid action we've seen before. He's being chased at around about 20 seconds by Pierre Rolland. Rolland is not actually giving up too much space here, and he, in fact, I think, is riding an incredible race at 24 years of age. All of a sudden, we may be looking at the renaissance of French cycling.
We've got a couple of good ones coming through this year in the Tour de France, youngsters, and in the next 2 years, yes, the French might at last find a winner since Bernard Hinault back in 1985. And you're looking at, he's even on his own back there. There's an attack by Peter Belitzer from HTC. Another surprise man, may not be an immediate reply to this, although it looks might be Sanchez's reply.
Well, let's not forget he was 3rd overall in the Vuelta a España last year. He's ridden himself carefully through the mountains, and he's riding with a man looking like a man who knows exactly where his body can go. Sanchez has seen that he's got himself a little bit of a gap there, and he's looking to try and keep himself well up in the top 10 at the end of the day. Now, he could be a dangerous rider, Sanchez. He was one of the strongest riders on the previous Col du Galibier.
He was. He dropped out after a terrific ride through the Pyrenees. He got right up amongst the leaderboard. He's dropped out to 8th place yesterday at the end. He's 5 minutes 20 behind Voigtler, and take off 15 seconds. He's 5:05 behind Andy Schleck, who's the leader on the road right now. And, but he seems to have recovered entirely today. He's had a very, very good day's racing. But it's still the story of the renaissance of the winner of the Tour de France 3 times, Alberto Contador. This is the picture I love to see, but the riders must never see it.
No, it's absolutely horrendous. Those are the 21 switchbacks that takes the race right the way up to Alpe d'Huez. That's not Alpe d'Huez there, that's just the small town of Oison. A little bit further up, you see the zigzags continue right up, and that's where the finishing line is, right in that hamlet on the top of the Alpe.
And that's still where we've got to go. We have just under 5 miles, 7.7 kilometers to go to the summit. 2:19 back to the yellow jersey, but now Sanchez is also going away. He's not going to be reacted on by the others because he's lost too much time now.
Well, it's
55 seconds now, and that's all it is. And they've gone back to 56 as I speak. So that's less than a minute now, and the road doesn't get really easier, but very shortly he's going to come round the corner. He'll see the chalets of the Alpe right in front of him, and they are still 3 miles away from the summit. Champion, and really they shouldn't be running in front of those cars. It's not a healthy thing to do.
No, he's going around Dutch corner there. You can see it's painted in orange. They're dressed in orange today, not for the Basque supporters, but this is a little bit of Holland, and the crowd are going crazy.
This is Dutch corner, and they had hoped to be cheering. Robert Hessing up to the lead here. He's had a terrible tour. Again, crashes for him. So they're reserving their cheers now for Alberto Contador, and that'll be quickly followed by Andy Schleck, Cadel Evans, Frank Schleck, Riblon. Ryder Hagedal is there, and Tommy Danielson has got himself back up here as well, the American, and also the little Prince Damiano Cunego.
Well, he's done a great job, Tommy Danielson. A little tap on the shoulder there from Ryder Hagedal. Said, look, mate, I'm almost cooked here this afternoon. You stay in contact, because we could be laying the foundations down for the team victory for Team Garmin-Cervelo of the United States. But this man is doing a phenomenal job, Alberto Contador. I don't think I've ever seen him suffer quite as much as he's doing here. He's got the pride of a nation on his shoulders, the pride of Spain.
24 seconds, it's back to Sanchez and Pierre Rolland. 57 seconds back to the Schlecks and Cadel Evans. That's ironic, because 57 seconds is the difference between Andy Schleck and Cadel Evans in the overall classification. Contador carries #1, three-time winner of the Tour de France. The crowd wave him through here, a little bit more passive than lower down the slopes. A Spanish Basque flag just being waved at him here as he continues to climb up towards the summit of Alpe d'Huez. Behind at 21 seconds, Sanchez Rolland, 5 kilometers to the finish, 3 miles. You can actually see the chalets on the top, but we can't show them to you at the moment. Peter Velits, Thomas de Gent are at 40 seconds, and the Schlecks and Evans are at 56 seconds. They're holding it, but boy, what hard work. So as we look at the slopes up towards the summit here, today's commercial free is brought to you by Nissan and the 100% electric Nissan Leaf. The dizzy height of Alpe d'Huez. Well, they had 1 million people on these slopes when it was a time trial that Lance Armstrong won. I don't suppose we've got 1 million today, but we have one heck of a lot of people watching the Tour de France. 2 Danish people. They're the Vikings trying to catch up with Contador.
Well, I don't think that was very nice. I'm not sure what that was all about, as Alberto Contador is not too happy about all these people running alongside, and it can be extremely off-putting as Contador tries to concentrate on the job in hand that he needs to do. He's holding on to still approximately that 1-minute advantage he's got over the Andy Schleck group. I don't think he's going to trouble Andy Schleck too much in the overall standings, but Cadel Evans needs to pay attention to Alberto Contador, make sure he doesn't get too much more than that 1-minute mark.
The crowd are getting a little bit crazed at the moment here as they try to close down the gaps. The spread is 2 minutes and 53. It's 1:05 now. They've opened a little bit of gap on the Schleck group as they're under 5 kilometers to go now. All of the work being done by Andy Schleck, who's fighting for a yellow jersey tonight. He waits for him at the summit, remember. He'll be last to start in the time trial in yellow tomorrow. How can he win the day for France?
Well, Pierre Rolland is looking very cool there in that breakaway. A lot further down the slope, Phil. It's almost 3 minutes now for Thomas Voeckler. He's lived the dream for 10 days, and he's had the weight of France on his shoulders. I think they were all beginning to think that he was going to win the Tour de France. They thought that if he could survive to the top of the Col du Galibier, he could take it all the way up to Paris. But this final day in the Alps has put the final nail into 1 or 2 bike riders' coffins.
At the moment, the yellow jersey has lost nothing in the last few kilometers, which indicates that the others are slowing down because he's riding at the same speed. Sanchez is now going to have to content himself with dragging up the green jersey of Pierre Rolland. Remember, he's on the same team as the yellow jersey. An attack now by Damiano Cunego because he's opening up the in battle. He's not going to trouble anybody overall. He's 5th, but he's 3 3/4 minutes down, and we're inside 3 kilometers from the finish.
Well, this is a question of pride here for Damiano Cunego this afternoon, Phil. He's thinking at 2 to 3 kilometers to go. He may well be able to ride across that gap, but he's looking at a gap of pretty much 1 minute and 10 seconds. That's almost impossible on the final few kilometers of Alpe d'Huez.
Well, just how much, though, have they put on the road here? It may not be impossible. 11 seconds is still the gap of Sanchez and Rolland. I think Sanchez doesn't want to take Rolland up to Contador, but he's coming inexorably there as he comes up now behind, and the chase behind is going to come after the with someone. The computer says Velits and de Gent are there. We haven't seen a single shot of them.
Yeah, they're there, Phil. They took off very early on. Velits actually went with Sammy Sanchez, but Sanchez just got rid of him as if he was a fleck of dust on his face. He's with de Gent, and they are in 4th and 5th place on the road. And finally, Ryder Hesjedal is just cracking a little bit under the pressure, and it's still the Schleck brothers being matched there all the way, pedal stroke for pedal stroke by Cadel Evans in the red.
Hesjedal will soon hear a lot of Canadian voices shouting him to hang on just before the summit now. And look at this now. Sanchez has brought up to Contador Pierre Rolland. You can see his face to see how hard the climb is, and Rolland has gone through on the inside, and I'm just wondering if he's made a move there because the camera's missed it, but I think Pierre Rolland attacked immediately. There he is.
Well, I tell you what, that's very surprising as Sammy Sanchez made the move right the way up, and he caught Alberto Contador, and at that point, I think when he went round that corner, it was so steep, he was caught out of breath.
Well, that was a great piece of thinking for the youngster in France in green here, Pierre Rolland. Contador just about hooked up, but already at his limit is Samuel Sanchez. If Rolland slows down, Sanchez might come back here. But this is a different battle. This is the battle for the win. If they start this infighting, then the boys from behind are going to close in. Currently, they're 63 seconds, just gone up to 66 seconds behind.
Well, how happy are the French going to be with this Tour de France now, Phil? Because they've had the yellow jersey for 10 days on the shoulders of Thomas Voeckler, and now they could very well be looking at the possibility of a stage victory on one of the most iconic races, most iconic mountains that the Tour has to offer.
And on the same team as the yellow jersey, Thomas Voeckler. Then Cadel Evans has gone. This is the answer now for Australia. Now, can Schleck contain himself? He's gone with him. He never misses a move, does he, Andy Schleck?
He does not miss a move. There's attacks all over the slopes of this mountain now as we're racing to try and win the yellow jersey. Other riders are racing to try and win the individual stage, and Cadel Evans has almost got himself across to Damiano Cunego in the blink of an eye.
Cunego won't know what's coming on, and Pierre Roland has dropped Contador. He's gone back to Schleck. France is racing to its first stage win on the iconic stage of Alpe d'Huez, and on a day when Europcar lose the individual lead, they get the new man in the white jersey and could be a stage win as well. It's an incredible battle, Paul, but Schleck has hung on. Now, very important, even if Schleck finishes with Cadel Evans, Evans will move to second overall because Frank Schleck is only 4 seconds ahead of Cadel Evans. He's lost that now.
Yeah, well, Frank Schleck has lost that because he's really suffering to try and stay in contact with this race, and what a time trial it's going to line up to be if we've got Andy Schleck starting in last place and Cadel Evans starting in penultimate place at the end of the day. So the French finally, Phil, look like they're going to get their stage victory this afternoon through the tunnel, a little bit further down the road, and it's still around about a minute to the chasers of Andy Schleck and Cadel Evans.
But what an incredible day in the Tour de France. So many riders believed in themselves that they can win the Tour, and they are putting everything out to try and do just that. Cunego has managed to resist the attack. Frank Schleck is fighting his way back into the picture, and a Frenchman is trying to win the stage on the day. Pierre Roland in his first Tour de France.
Well, it's amazing to think that Sammy Sanchez did the bulk of the work coming across there. He caught up his mate Alberto Contador. They're shouting at each other to work together now to try and get back to the Frenchman just a little bit further up the road. Alberto Contador has given everything this afternoon. There's the Frenchman just around the corner, looking back to see what the gap is. Oh, well, I can tell him it's 11 seconds.
It's a winning gap, I think. I better correct myself. It's his third Tour de France, but we didn't know him. He was on a different team last time, and he never, ever distinguished himself. But he has now, as he's gone to the new Europcar team, inspired as the man who's looked after the yellow jersey of Thomas Voeckler over every mountain and kept him in yellow for as long as he could. Now he's going to try and get the best young riders jersey and the stage win. Sanchez will be kicking himself because he took him up, and Evans goes again, and this time he never misses. He's after him again. Andy Schleck has gone. They've gone around Peter Velits and Thomas de Gent.
Well, now Evans is looking for second and third place on the road, or fourth place on the road, because just ahead of him now, not too far ahead, these two riders who are losing incredible chunks of time as they go on the Flamme Rouge, the red kite, 1,000 metres to go for the Frenchman.
And you know, by the start of the Tour de France, do this one, looks over his shoulder, he can still drive. The time doesn't worry too much now. This is going to be a huge cheer, and the Frenchman gets the win at Alpe d'Huez. As the crowd cheer, a two-arm salute, look, it's me, and he gets a white jersey as well. And it's the Olympic champion Samuel Sanchez who comes home, and for many the hero of the day, Alberto Contador, who will cross the line in third place.
Well, Alberto Contador tried to do everything to turn this race upside down this afternoon, and what a phenomenal performance by him. 34 kilometers an hour. Not really a good time to remind you that the elimination time this afternoon will be about 25 minutes, and I would think there's a lot of riders and a long way back. Andy Schleck now is coming up to the line, and he's caught up everybody.
Taking on Velits as they come in. Schleck determined. Evans must keep that gap closed down. There'll be time gaps if they don't. As they race towards the line now, Velits is going to take on Andy Schleck. Look at this. And there'll be no split time here because Evans is making a dash for the line. Evans wants to prove a point, and he usually finishes off with victory. But today, he'll have to pay second fiddle to Peter Velits, who is going to survive best. But in second place, it's Cadel Evans. I reckon tonight, in hindsight, he may have won the Tour de France tomorrow. So he's sits 57 seconds behind Andy Schleck when they start tomorrow in the time trial. And this will seal up the team Garmin-Cervelo as they finish Ryder Hesjedal and Tommy Danielson. But tomorrow, Paul, it will be Andy Schleck in the Maillot Jaune.
It will be Andy Schleck. What a fight by the Schleck brothers here this afternoon, Phil, and it's going to go down to that individual time trial. Christophe Riblon coming in. The Schleck brothers have made this race through the Alps quite remarkable. And by the way, let's not forget, at 1 kilometer to go, the yellow jersey at the start of the day, Thomas Voeckler, is still fighting, and he will fight all the way up to Paris, this young man. And still gets all the cheers. Now, this is Ryan Taramay coming in, but it's not enough time saved to keep that white jersey. It'll be presented tonight to Pierre Rolland. He started the day with only 33 seconds advantage over Rolland. Rolland has won the day, 2 minutes has gone by. So he's lost the white jersey to Pierre Rolland. In this group two, the back in the red is the American Santa Rosa, California, Levi Leipheimer, just behind Ivan Basso. Well, Ivan Basso tried with his team to keep this race in check, but what a battle everybody's had this afternoon. It really has been an incredible race. Pierre Rolland, by the way, Phil, said he needed a big chunk of time when we came up to the individual time trial to try and keep Ryan Taramay back. Well, that'll be an interesting battle. That one won't die until tomorrow either in the time trial for the white jersey, because Taramay is a very good time trial champion. We'll see as they continue to come in now. We've already seen Hesjedal has come in, and that's possibly has kept the lead for the riders in the team competition for Garmin-Cervelo. But Pierre Rolland has won his first stage of the Tour de France and the first stage this year for France. And there's going to be a huge cheer also, because you can hear them and they can just about see the yellow jersey coming around the corner. That's Thomas Voeckler. He's ridden exceptionally well, I have to say, today, Phil. I don't know where he's got all of his strength from, because he almost made it back into the group. Christian Vande Velde over there makes it the third rider for Garmin-Cervelo as well. He's getting a bigger cheer than the winner of the race today, and he's determined to show his colours at the front of this group. He had 15 seconds at the start of the day now, and he's lost 3 minutes of that, but it doesn't matter. He has gone out in a cloud of glory today, and well done to Voeckler. He won't be in yellow tomorrow, but he'll certainly be a better-known person because of it. So, tremendous riding. Pierre Rolland of France gets the first French stage win. As we now come up to the top of Alpe d'Huez, we've watched this ski station develop over the years since '73 when we first came up seriously. And now there's a map of France for you, and this is the result. Team Europcar of France gives Pierre Rolland his first ever stage victory in his third Tour de France. Sam Sanchez, the Olympic champion, finishes second. Contador, the defending champion, gets third. Velits, the top man on HTC High Road, is fourth. Cadel Evans, determined to win this tour, finishes in fifth, 57 seconds back, in the same time as Frank Schleck and Andy Schleck. Ryder Hesjedal just behind them in 10th place. The Canadian had a big welcome here on the top of the Alpe, because there's a lot of people from Canada over here watching Hesjedal this day. Tom Danielson came in 11th place. Jean-Christophe Perrault, the mountain biker, in 12th in his first tour. Ryan Taramay might get his white jersey back in the time trial tomorrow. Ivan Basso completes the top 15. We're far from done here on Alpe d'Huez, but we will take a break while the riders get their breath back, and the commentators, and we'll see you back here on the other side of the messages. Rejoin us as we wrap up an incredible day on the Tour de France. We'll see you in just a moment.
So after yesterday's disappointment, what'd you tell yourself to regroup and get motivated for today?
Yes, yesterday wasn't a good day. In the last case, I feel very bad. I don't know, maybe because this tour was hard for me with the crash, problem in my knee. But it's okay. This is the race. Yesterday wasn't a good day, but today I want to attack. I believe this in the morning in the hotel, and in the first K of the climb I attack. Okay, after don't win, but I am very happy with the stage.
Winning is a long shot, but being on the podium is still very much a possibility. If you do end up on the podium but not on the top step, how will you rate this Tour de France?
Dice que bueno, que ganar es muy difícil, pero tal vez estar en el podio. ¿Cuál es tu planteamiento en este?
Yeah, yes, but for me, the most important is the victory. You know, for me it's the same. Make a 4, 3, 2. It's only the victory, or for the next, for me, is not important.
All right, congratulations on a good performance today.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're back in the clouds of Alpe d'Huez, and I think we can go straight down to the podium. There he is now, Pierre Rolland, who becomes the first man to win since the man he's shaking hands with there, Bernard Hinault, winning at Alpe d'Huez in 1986. And he is absolutely delighted, and well he might be.
Well, at 24 years of age, Phil, this kid's got a massive career ahead of him, and that was a well-timed sprint by him, and he waited for the right moment. He used Sammy Sanchez. He must have been a little bit overawed by the fact that he was riding with the Olympic champion, a winner of the Tour de France on 3 occasions, Alberto Contador, but he knew this climb very, very well. He's ridden it time and time again in training, and he's been watching videos of everybody who's won it, and he said, I didn't understand how they could go up the hill quite that fast. Today he proved that he can do it too.
Well, he was very flattered when he was told that fact, that he now follows in the wheel tracks of Bernard Hinault. He will shortly see him get the white jersey too as the new young rider. He goes over to Bernard Hinault, is appreciative of the fact. Now, will he go and do what Bernard Hinault last did for the French in 1986 and one day win the Tour de France? And by the way, just finishing while we're talking on these pictures is the green jersey of Mark Cavendish in a group of riders, and they're very, very close to the cutoff. They're going to make it by, they may actually go behind. They're outside the time limit by about 15-20 seconds, which will mean he lose another 20 points of his lead. So he could well be out of the green jersey tonight. We'll find out as we continue to watch the show. They have changed. Andy Schleck is the man in yellow. Brother Frank is in second. Cadel Evans is in third. The spread is 57 seconds for the time trial tomorrow. Thomas Voeckler stays in fourth place, but at 2 minutes 10. Cunego holds fifth at 3:31.
What a battle we've seen today, though. What a battle over 48 hours. Alberto Contador in sixth place at 3:55. Sammy Sanchez in seventh. Tommy Danielson still looking very solid in ninth place. And Pierre Rolland, with that ride today, has moved up into the top 10.
And listen to the crowd here, because I think half are from Luxembourg. Huge cheers for Andy Schleck, who pulls on the maillot jaune on the eve of the final weekend, but he will not feel safe for Paris with that time trial tomorrow.
Well, he's going to have to ride the time trial of his life, and so too is Cadel Evans, who starts 57 seconds behind him in the overall standings. What a fight that's going to be, and what a suspense.
It's rather reminiscent of the time gap between Greg LeMond and Laurent Fignon in 1989, and LeMond turned the tables and won the Tour by 8 seconds. It's going to be another big day in the Tour de France tomorrow. Yes, and welcome now to the centre of Grenoble. It's showdown time in the Tour de France, stage 20, the penultimate day before Paris, the time trial. Coolish weather conditions, light winds, and the forecast is for showers, and that could alter the race out on the slippery course. All of these beautiful pictures around the lower Alps today coming available in high definition. As we look down, this is the current standings. Fabien Cancellara, the world champion, is there first. Caran is second, Maoli is third. But there is a couple of faster times at the check now ahead of Cancellara as we watch the start of Tony Martin, who in the pre-tour time trial in the Critérium du Dauphiné, this man was the winner in a time of 55:27. Cancellara is currently in with a time of 57:15.
Slightly different conditions, though, Phil, because that time trial in the Critérium du Dauphiné was after 3 days of racing. This is after 3 weeks of racing. The man who does the best time here this afternoon is going to be the rider who is the freshest after 3 very difficult weeks in the Tour.
Well, one thing's for sure, we brought all the crowds away from Alpe d'Huez and dropped them in the centre of Grenoble today. There's an electric atmosphere to see the climax of the Tour de France, without doubt. This looks like Sorensen coming up the finishing straight at the moment. Richie Porte is possibly 300 metres to go anyway. And I think that's Miller behind him. Miller has done actually not a good ride at all. He's outside the top 16 finishes just now.
Well, in fact, there's some incredible times starting to be registered, Phil, as we see Richie Porte. He wanted to test himself here this afternoon. He's not been anywhere. That's a time of 57:03. That's the best time, the new best time.
Well, we've got no time checks on Port. He was actually 40 seconds down on Cancellara at the first check. He was looking where he moved up to. He moved up to second, the second down at the second check. He took the best time just before the finish at the third check, and he's come in with the best time. That is a surprise.
Well, there's some fast times as well, Phil, at that first time check at 15 kilometres covered, because Edvald Bosenhagen of Norway and Team Sky has just gone through there with a new best time, 20 minutes and 34 seconds. So this is Edvald Bosenhagen. As you can see, he's just caught the rider who started just ahead of him, and he will be looking to do something special this afternoon after the tragedy that really has come down over Norway. Bosenhagen just gone by David Lusley there of Team Lamprey.
57 minutes 3 seconds now the time to beat. Of course, it's not just the time to win the time trial that we're interested in, it's the time required to win the Tour de France, and that will become a battle of the last 3 riders to start today. Of Philippe Gilbert, Tony Martin has just gone through and set the best time at the first check of 20 minutes 12 seconds. He's a long way out from home at the moment. Philippe Gilbert's had another great tour, Paul, the champion of Belgium of the road. He wore the yellow jersey on the first day and he slipped his gears.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a strange start for him, and he's trying to get it all sorted out, and that is not exactly the way you want a time trial to start. And he obviously didn't quite have the shifter in the right position there. He's a guy who I think has ridden a superb Tour de France. I never would have predicted a top 30 finish for a guy like Philippe Gilbert. I thought he would have lost so much time in the mountains, but he's coming out of this Tour de France like a changed man.
Well, it's that way for him this season. He's had the most wonderful season as a cyclist. It's his 5th Tour de France. He's worn the green jersey 4 days in this race, but he's actually worn it on 3 separate occasions, 2 days, 2 days and 3 days during this race. He wore the King of the Mountains jersey for 3 days, and he's worn the yellow jersey for 1 day. But we're still starting at 2-minute intervals. Geraint Thomas of Sky will go out 2 minutes behind Levi Leipheimer. This is one of Leipheimer's favourite disciplines. He's a previous winner of a time trial in the Tour de France.
Yeah, he will try and do something special to savour Team Radio Shack's Tour de France. They have had more bad luck, I think, than anybody else in the Tour. There's a problem here for Bosenhagen. That was a quick bike change there. Obviously, they were ready for that, and they got up there as quickly as possible. Now, he was, in fact, second at the first time check, but I think he was starting to weaken a fraction because he went through the second time check in only the 5th place.
Yeah, and we're waiting to see. And this is what happened here. He knew about it. It looks like his handlebar has snapped there, Paul, has it?
Yep, it has, just on the right, and that is amazing that
Good
he actually was able to hold himself upright. It was actually one of the handlebars in the middle that the riders used to get into that aerodynamic tuck position.
I tell you what, that was they were really smart changes, I have to say. I think you're right, he was falling away from the leaderboard. He was 49 seconds behind Thomas de Gendt at the second check. We haven't got him on the board yet. Oh yes, we have. He was coming back. He's 39 seconds off at the third check, so he's heading home at the moment, and he's looking to pierce the top 3 finishers.
3 riders from the end are starting at 12 minutes past the hour. Cadel Evans, he's got a rendezvous with destiny this afternoon.
Martin, who rides for the American HTC High Road team from California. He's a terrific time trialist. This year he's won time trials in Portugal, in France, in Spain, and finally came back to France in June to win stage 3 on this very course in the Critérium du Dauphiné, the penultimate training race before the Tour de France began.
And expected to finish in the top 10 in the overall standings at the Tour de France. Well, that's not going to happen, but he's now putting his seal of approval on the time trial.
200 metres to go for Tony Martin, 55.27. He won't be quite as quick as he was when he rode in the Critérium du Dauphiné, but it will be a déjà vu because he will go top of the leaderboard by a long way today. 55.33 is the best time for Tony Martin, and that is going to take some beating. Ryder Hesjedal here in the start house now. We've seen Christian van der Velde, very important for Ryder as well, because he's part of the same Garmin-Cervelo team here at the moment, and an awful lot of support these last 3 days from the Canadians. They've been here in big numbers, and this is the man they've come to see. He finished 7th in the Tour de France, a terrific ride last year. He's had another good ride. He's got better and better in the last 3 or 4 days of the race. He leaves the start house sitting 17th in the Tour de France. And if he did a really good ride today, he would probably climb 1 place to 16th. He's very, very close to the man who will start behind him, Aimar Zubeldia, the Spanish rider on the Radio Shack team. This is Nicholas Roach out on course as we dodge around the narrow streets just away from home. These are the big names we want to take a big interest in. Tom Danielson, the top American, goes at 9:54 Eastern. Alberto Contador 10:03. Thomas Voeckler at 10:09. Then the big three. One of these three will win the Tour de France today. Evans 10:12. Schleck 3 minutes back of him, and the other Schleck 6 minutes behind Cadel Evans. And then best time.
This is a very important ride here for this man, Raim Terame, the Estonian national time trial champion. He is sitting in second place in the best young rider competition, and for 1.5 minutes he's got a very good chance of taking the overall lead away from Pierre Rolland, the Frenchman who yesterday, Phil, won the summit climb up to Alpe d'Huez, the first Frenchman to do that since 1986.
And the only other Frenchman apart from Bernard Hinault in that year. Anyway, Raim Terame has had the white jersey on his shoulders, but for the moment he's lost it, as Paula says, to Pierre Rolland. That's going to be a real battle for that one too. Mark Cavendish is safe at the moment in his green jersey.
Yeah, 1.5 minutes separating those two riders, and that will be a huge battle, because Raim Terame is a very good individual time trialist, as Philippe Gilbert goes under 2 kilometers to go.
Now this is a big moment for Tom Danielson. He sits 9th overall in the classification. He just wants a solid time trial to keep that position. Well, he can't really look forward, Tom Danielson, Paul, because they're too far ahead of him, but he's got to keep looking over his shoulder just in case Pierre Rolland does well. Contador riding his 5th Tour de France. He's won 3, and I don't think it's possible now for him to win this one. But is he going to try and win the time trial? That's the big question. He's done it in the past when he's worn the yellow jersey. He's gone into the start house. Well, he took a run at the start house. He went in very cleanly, and now he's got a couple of minutes. The riders are starting at 3-minute intervals, and Contador will chase his friend and the Olympic champion and his rival, Sam Sanchez, who started about 2.5 minutes ago. Concentration there in the face of Alberto Contador. We don't know if he's going to give this his best shot, Paul, or just ride around the course. He's not interested in finishing second in the Tour de France.
Well, Phil,
I'd like to win the time trial.
I'll tell you one thing, Phil. He's not the kind of guy who's going to ride around the course just for fun this afternoon. He is called Alberto Contador. He is a champion. He's won 6 Grand Tours. 3 times the Tour de France, 2 times the Giro d'Italia, once the Vuelta a España. He would like to win a stage. He tried very hard yesterday, a long way out, to try and win the stage to the summit of the Alpe d'Huez. So why not bounce back today and show people why he is the best stage race rider in the world, despite the fact he's had an awful lot of bad luck in this year's Tour.
He's getting a countdown now. There's the 10-second clock. Well, as Contador rolls out the start house, he pulled his foot off the pedal there. They started to applaud. I'm not uncertain they didn't start to boo either just after that.
Well, I think everyone was quite shocked at the way he came out of the starting gate. Vladimir Karpet stops the clock in 16th place there as he comes up to the finishing line, and he just does not have himself under complete control. I think he was trying to get away quickly, and the race referee was actually holding him back, and that you can see him shaking his head. He won't be happy with that at all. Not a great way to start.
No, but they're clapping him now as he gets down the straight here. Quickly will settle in. It's always disturbing because this is a master of concentration, the time trial. Everything must go right when you make that start, and it couldn't be more critical when the next riders go. Behind Contador goes Damiano Cunego, having his best ever Tour de France. Then comes Thomas Voeckler, who is also having his best ever Tour de France. Then Cadel Evans, who's twice finished second. Then Frank Schleck, then Andy Schleck. This is now the arrival of Sandy Cassar. He's going to be a little bit off the pace as he starts to come in, but nonetheless, another fighting performance by the Frenchman.
Solid performance by Sandy Cassar. He concentrated out on the course. It looked as if he was going to be a lot faster, but I think he may well stop the clock inside of the top 20.
So Cassar, it's a very good ride. He's well inside the hour. Nonetheless here, Jürgen Roelands, former champion of Belgium there, in 11th place. That's the time. That's gone by now. Carlos Barredo, the Rabobank Spaniard. Now it's Jeremy Robb. We've talked about him a lot. And he comes in 13th best time, 58.36. Good riding. A little bit too far back. He's 2 minutes, 10 seconds away from Andy Schleck. This is Thomas Voeckler, who has become the French hero over the last week. He led the Tour for 9 days, and they literally had to rip that yellow jersey off his back. He would not give it up.
No, he fought every day. He predicted his own demise, Phil, I think on 3 separate occasions. I'll lose the jersey today, I'll lose the jersey today, and he kept it on every occasion. And in fact, if they hadn't got rid of him yesterday on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez, we might have been looking at a French champion.
As they cheer him down the ramp now, he has got to hold off the advancing Damiano Cunego and Alberto Contador. He starts with an advantage over Contador of 1 minute 44 seconds, and Contador is well capable of beating Voigtler over this distance by that gap. So he's racing now to finish 4th in the Tour de France, knowing it's far from certain. He's underwing into the start house. There he is. He looks ahead. What does he see? A yellow jersey and the Arc de Triomphe? Or is he going to be beaten by Andy Schleck?
Well, in about 20 minutes' time, we will get the first indication of how Cadel Evans is riding when he goes through that 15-kilometer time check. He knows that he has to take back big time on Andy Schleck this afternoon. He's looking at 57 seconds. He's only looking at 4 seconds on Frank Schleck. That shouldn't be a problem. But the big battle, I think, will be between him and Andy.
He knows he can beat Andy Schleck. He knows he can slaughter Frank Schleck in a time trial. But can he do it today, right now? The concentration. He has spoken with the utmost confidence for 3 weeks. He has twice finished second in the Tour de France, so too has Andy Schleck. One of them will 3 times finish second in the Tour de France by the end of this day. The other one will get his first victory. 2 great cyclists who've gone head-to-head for 21 days. It's come down to 42.5 kilometres. And I know for a fact all of Australia are nailed to their seats, even though it's after midnight there.
Well, it's done. The Tour was they both wanted to get onto the podium in Paris, but if they had to out on the course, one would sacrifice himself for the other.
So Schleck starts 3 minutes behind Evans and 3 seconds, 4 seconds quicker at the moment than Cadel Evans. So he's got that much in the bank. Cadel has to remove that 4 seconds first.
Well, if you talk about an Achilles heel, this man's Achilles heel, of course, is the individual time trial. He's never really been good at it, and he knows that, but he knows how to defend him. Strangely enough, but it was because of his time trial last year that he actually won the Tour of Switzerland ahead of Lance Armstrong.
That's right, and he did the time trial, went to his hotel. They had to go and find him and say, hey, come back, you've won the race. He really thought his time trial wouldn't have been good enough, but it was. We now go into the start house. They're still chanting Andy around the back here. Everything is yellow for him. His gloves, his jersey, his shorts, his shoes, his bike. It's all about the Tour de France and winning. He's twice finished second. He's 3 times won the white jersey of the best newcomer. Now, what can he do in the time trial? He's always feared Cadel Evans, and he's always said it.
Well, cast your mind back 12 months when he was very confident going into the time trial against Alberto Contador. That's the 10-second bell.
Probably the biggest crowd of the day of all 167 riders. The Maillot Jaune of the Tour de France on the eve of its end in Paris is on the road, knowing he has a 57-second advantage over Cadel Evans and 53 over his brother Frank.
Well, it's a big battle for both men, Phil. Strangely enough, both of them second overall in the Tour de France on 2 occasions, but only one of them could be the winner. Everybody says that the big animators of this race have been Andy Schleck and his brother Frank, and of course Cadel Evans. Evans has taken the responsibility of this race every time it looked as if it was slipping away from control. It was him or his team that went to the front, grabbed the race by the horns and pulled it all back together, including that incredible chase on his own, single-handedly on the road up to Le Galibier when he pulled back 2 minutes on Andy Schleck in 11.5 kilometres.
Well, Cadel, everybody is through the 15-kilometre checkpoint. Tony Martin remains fastest there. Cadel Evans officially second by 1/10 of a second over Contador. They're now saying, the computer, that he is now 13 seconds. He is closing in, and we should get this confirmed at about 27.5 kilometres, which is the scene of the next check. Are we witnessing the first ever winner of the Tour de France from Australia? Well, at the moment, computer says 12 seconds is now the gap virtual. He's already pulled back 45 seconds of his 57 deficit. Cadel Evans looks incredibly smooth. I can only think, Paul, that Andy is suffering from nerves here.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's nerves or whether it's the amount of energy that he dispensed over the 48 hours spent in the Alps when he was at the front of the race on a lot of those kilometres. Took a lot of wind into his face, and maybe he hasn't recovered for this final individual time trial. But Cadel Evans, I have to say, was looking extremely smooth and very comfortable turning over a large gear.
But this could be an incredible ride. Cadel Evans has gone through 21 seconds behind Tony Martin. If he continues to pick this up, he might even take out the time trial as well. He's a tenth of a second quicker than Alberto Contador at the moment. Contador, of course, is not a challenger this year for the Maillot Jaune of the man who is sweeping up the course today. As we speak, it's now saying 9 seconds on the computer before there is a change of leadership in the Tour de France. Remember, whoever pulls on yellow tonight will win the Tour de France tomorrow. Well, nobody else has ever done before. I understand the request is already in Australia, Paul, for a national holiday if he does win the Tour de France, and I wonder, but he's not going to just win the time trial, not just going to win the yellow, he's looking to win the time trial as well.
That's what he's looking for. He's looking at the time of Tony Martin. That's the advantage of starting at the back end of the afternoon. You get the references of everybody else who's been out on the course. He's talked to all of his teammates. They've all finished. They've explained the race route to him this afternoon. He knows this course. He's ridden it before. He rode it in the month of June in the Critérium de Dauphiné. He wasn't on full form at that moment, but he did finish in second place overall. He is flying around this course.
Evans, Volker is just ahead of him at the moment. Cadel Evans, the computer says, is now at 35 seconds to the good. We are waiting for the arrival of Frank Schleck. He will be next, and then there's only one more to come. Frank Schleck out on the climbs at the moment and looking a little bit laboured here. He's not going to see anything for Cadel Evans, who started 3 minutes ahead of him, and it'll be interesting to see how he compares with his brother, who was 2 seconds slower than him at the first check. So Voigtler has got the invidious position now of holding off Cadel Evans, who is chasing him by 3 minutes out of the start house.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, we could very well, Phil, be for Frank Schleck looking at a little bit of a difference between whether he finishes on the podium, whether he finishes off it, because Alberto Contador is doing a storming ride and Frank Schleck is not doing a very good ride at all. While you look here at Cadel Evans, he's prizing open the advantage now. It's around about the half-a-minute mark, but this is the part of the course as we go down this slight descent now that suits Cadel Evans, his speed and his power and his ability to go around these corners, which goes back to his mountain biking days when he was the World Cup winner on 2 occasions.
Flicks left, flicks right. You know, this wasn't supposed to be like this today. The organisers are celebrating 100 years in the Alps, made this an excruciatingly hard journey over the high mountains of the Pyrenees and the Alps. Normally the last time trial is 55 kilometres. Today it's only 42. It wasn't meant to be a battle like this, and it's turned out to be one of the finest finishes since Greg LeMond turned the tables on Laurent Fignon by 8 seconds back in 1989. We're looking at Alberto Contador. In the last 2 or 3 days, this man has refound himself in the Tour de France and has got the bit between his teeth.
It'll be a big count, I think, for Alberto Contador, but he's gone out with a special ride this afternoon. He was looking for 1 minute and 35 seconds over Thomas Voeckler, but if Frank Schleck doesn't do a great ride over the last couple of kilometres, he may well see Alberto Contador climb up into 3rd place tonight.
He's certainly got Cunego's place. Has he got Voeckler's place? Frank Schleck has lost 2 minutes 17 already to Cadel Evans, as Contador now comes up towards the finish. The best time of Thomas de Gent on the board is 2nd best time. He's aiming at that. He's going to get in the 2nd place finish in the time trial. Only pipped by Tony Martin, 56.38 for Alberto Contador. Now that just tells us the man is back. Is he good enough for a podium in Paris?
Well, I'll tell you what, Phil, if he puts 3 minutes into Frank Schleck, he will climb onto the podium in Paris at the end of today. And what a show of defiance that is after all of the bad luck that he's had in the Tour this year.
I think the time is telling us he has lost at least his 5th place to Alberto Contador.
Well, Damiano Cunego, he did a great ride. He's not one of the best individual time trialists, and I think whether or not he gets overtaken by Alberto Contador, Phil, at 59 minutes 11 seconds, 27th place, he is still going to be satisfied with his Tour de France this year.
Cadel Evans piles on the pressure. He's never slowed down at all. Cunego, a little wry smile on his face as Evans charges on now. Thomas Voigtla deserves 4th place, but will the time say he will keep 4th place as he races up towards the line? Look at his face. How many times, Paul, have we seen this face twisted in pain this last 2 weeks?
Well, this is the best time trial that Thomas Voigtla has ever ridden in his career. It's his best Tour de France, and it's his best season as well, as he stops the clock there with the 12th best time. He's lost 2:13 over Tony Martin, but that's not what he was concerned about. It was everybody else in this bike race.
If he had looked over his shoulder, he might just have seen Cadel Evans lining up on him, because Cadel Evans was inside 500 metres to go when Thomas Voigtla crossed the finishing line, and Voigtla started 3 minutes ahead of him. Here he comes, swinging into the home straight, and as he lines up for that home straight finish now, this is the winning ride of the Tour de France. Bet your boots on it, as Cadel Evans of Australia makes history today. Look at the crowd, and there's thousands of Australians here, let me remind you, as he grits his teeth and pulls for Australia. Cadel Evans cannot be beaten now. He is over a minute to the good. He has absolutely slaughtered his opposition in just 42.5 kilometres of racing. His time is 55:40. It's second best on the day. He shrugs his shoulder, but he's won the Tour de France.
Well, that's not the important thing. Yes, he would have loved to win this final individual time trial here, Phil, but more importantly, it's the time gaps that he's put over everybody else in this bike race this afternoon, because Cadel Evans has opened up the gaps that he's been waiting for 3 weeks patiently to do, and now he's done it. All he has to do is wait for about 7 minutes.
It has to be the most wonderful feeling, I think. Frank Schleck has gone through the third to last check, 2 minutes and 11 seconds behind the time set there of Cadel Evans, and Andy Schleck still hasn't gone through that point. And remember, the difference between the 2 points is 5.5 kilometres, and it takes approximately 59 seconds to 1 minute 1 second to ride a kilometre. So I'm afraid Andy is losing time still to his brother. It's a horrible feeling, because he has been an absolutely magnificent competitor since this Tour de France began. He came with one ambition, to win the Tour de France. On the eve of the time trial, he got his hands on yellow, and it's been ripped off his back by the Australian. Well, I won't apply that little statistic, because Frank Schleck is coming on in towards the finish now as 58 minutes ticks away.
Well, I tell you what, we might have been a little bit derogatory about his time trialing ability. He's actually matching his own teammate there, Maxime Montfort, in the ride up to the line, and Maxime Montfort was once national champion of Belgium. That's probably, I reckon that's a good ride by Frank.
He's pulled out a great ride at 58:14 for his known ability. 19th time on the day, and well inside the time he requires to hold a podium place in Paris. So Frank Schleck has done what he could do, and he's kept a podium place in Paris. And it looks to me as though the Schlecks will be standing alongside Cadel Evans in second and third.
Only one man left out on the road of the Tour. He wears a yellow jersey on his shoulders. That was one that he pulled on last night, but it won't be yellow at the end of the race this evening, Phil, because that's going to go to the Antipodes, and it's going to go all the way down to Australia. I think we might see the green and gold tomorrow on the Champs-Élysées.
One of the most popular men in the world of cycling is racing home to close down this incredible stage of the Tour de France, which has seen an Australian get the final yellow jersey to ride to Paris in tomorrow. Andy Schleck comes in. His brother recorded 52 minutes and 5 seconds for the ride, and it looked, oh sorry, that was a little bit out, that was the wrong time. I can't even see his time now, does it matter? 58:14 it was, and he's come in marginally quicker in 58 minutes and 11.7. That wasn't a bad prediction. I said 58:12.
Absolutely brilliant, Phil. I've always thought you were the best. Anyway, that was a great ride by Andy and Frank Schleck. They're not great time trialists. We knew that was their Achilles heel, but I think reflected by a superb ride by Cadel Evans, doing probably one of the best individual time trials that we've seen him ride over the last few years. And that win in that second place in a few moments' time will be transferring him into a yellow jersey at the end of the day.
55:40 the time of Cadel Evans, 58:12 the time of Andy Schleck. This is the melee now. He has given everything possible to win the Tour de France, and he fell just that little bit short. Cadel Evans, as you said, Paul, was on the ride of his life today. From the minute he left the start house, he never looked like a man who was ever going to slow down. Absolute result then. Tony Martin wins, as he did in the pre-tour time trial over the same course. Cadel Evans in second place, only 6 seconds slower. Alberto Contador at 1:05, Thomas de Gendt at 1:28, and Richie Ford in 5th place. Perrault did a ride of his life too. Cancellara, the world champion, swept away only to 8th. Ryan Tarame tried to pull back that white jersey, and he finished in 10th place. Tommy Danielson, 11th, confirms his 9th place in the Tour de France today. Thomas Voigtler, 13th. He really excelled. Still no signs yet of Andy Schleck. And there he is, 17th place for Andy. 2:37 his deficit on the day. And that was 2 minutes 30 on Cadel Evans himself. All right, we'll take a break. We'll all take our deep breaths and see who we can round up for you. This has been the decisive day of the Tour de France. The Tour de France, the city of Grenoble, and out on stage first of all is the winner of the time trial. Tony Martin gets his first ever victory of a stage in the Tour de France. It is his discipline, the time trial. He was very, very frightened when he saw Cadel Evans was only 2 seconds behind him at the last check. In the end, though, he went out to 7 seconds, and Tony Martin got his first win. And we can claim him in America as well, because he comes out of California, San Luis Obispo, with the team HTC High Road. Very, very proud moment for Tony. He rode so well all the way. He was the fastest at every time check. And now he's got the victory for HTC High Road, and they might get a weekend double, because tomorrow it'll go down to the sprint on the Champs-Élysées, where we'll see Mark Cavendish. There he is on the right. He is congratulating Tony Martin. That was before he went up for his award. The stage result, Tony Martin wins 55-33, almost the identical. There it is. You can hear the Australian voices. You might get to see them. It's a huge moment. There they are. This is a huge moment for Australia, believe me. They have tried from the days of Phil Anderson, who once came to the Tour de France and led it for 10 days, and Bernard Hinault came and asked us who was the Australian, because he'd never heard of him and he was giving him a lot of trouble. But now, the year 2011, tomorrow they'll have their first winner of the Tour de France. And you know, I am pretty sure that line smiled then when he kissed it. Crikey, Cadel. Actually, the slogan which is developed all around Australia today, because we keep in touch with the Australians, is go and yell for Cadel. And I think they did just that. Have a look at the Michelob Ultra overall standings as we now head to Paris. Cadel Evans, the new leader, 1:34 over Andy Schleck. Bro Frank is at 2:30, so the brothers get on the podium tomorrow. Thomas Voigtler has kept his 4th place overall. Contador moves up a place. Sam Sanchez is 6th, and Tom Danielson keeps his 9th place for Paris and will lead the winning team tomorrow onto the Champs-Élysées, Garmin Cervelo. That is a terrific. They've never had such a great Tour de France in the team's history. This is Cadel Evans here. You see, it did smile, didn't it? It's taken 3,400 kilometers to find the Eiffel Tower over 3 weeks in this year's Tour de France. We have witnessed a real breathtaking tour, and today the riders will come home, all bar about 30 of them who have retired along the way. We head to Paris today with an Australian in yellow. There is the picture of the riders now at the start. These are live pictures. We are taking the stage from start to its finish today in the center of Paris, and we are bathed in, I won't say warm sunshine, but it's not cold either. It's a pleasant day here for the arrival of the Tour de France.
Yeah, all the survivors now lining themselves up for this final stage. Should be an extremely nice day this afternoon, Phil. It will warm up in the latter part of the afternoon to 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds around about 9 miles an hour coming from a westerly direction. There is a threat of a thundercloud in the latter part of the afternoon, but looking out from the commentary position here, I think it'll be fine. Go up and down the Champs-Élysées at an average speed of in excess of 30 miles an hour.
There's the most colourful washing line in the world of cycling. From the world champion on the right there, Thor Hushovd, to the yellow jersey of the Australian Cadel Evans. Green, it's not safe for Mark Cavendish. That will be fought out today for sure. On the polka dot jersey just off to the left of our picture is Samuel Sanchez, the winner of the King of the Mountains, and the white jersey being worn by a Frenchman, Pierre Rolland, and there he is there. He had his proudest moment in the Tour de France when he won on Alpe d'Huez, and it's for the rider who is 25 or under on the 1st of January 1986.
The jersey over to the right-hand side, the white jersey with the rainbow bands around the middle, that's Thor Hushovd, and he of course is the reigning world champion.
So to the cheers of the crowd in Créteil, which has always played a part in the Tour de France. It used to be the home for the famous Pernod drink. It probably still is. Pernod were a major sponsor in the development of cycling in the 70s, 80s and 90s. As they roll away then from the Créteil, it's only 45 kilometers before we enter the confines of France. There's a little bit of quite a long neutralized start today. We always have some neutralization, but it's going to take about 20 minutes for the official start to be taken today.
Yeah, this is it's really because it's a fairly built-up area around Créteil. It's one of the suburbs of Paris, a very important business centre, and it's during this first part allows the riders to get away and onto some slightly safer roads for the race to take part.
There's the view of the Tour de France. A terrific atmosphere, I have to say, at the other end of the course on the Champs-Élysées, where the caravan is now parading up and down, waving to the crowds. There's nowhere nicer to be, I don't think, in the world on the last day of July in Paris on the Champs-Élysées, and the sun is out. I wouldn't say the same if it was raining. It'd be quite miserable. But today is a beautiful day. Cadel Evans is going to live through this day today as the first Australian to win the Tour. Remember, he has to cross the finishing line, of course, but the only thing that would stop him now would be an accident, and that's certainly what we don't want to see. But on the other side there, the rider in green, Mark Cavendish, he has to fight to keep that green jersey. And I know British cyclist has ever won the race on points. Competition started in 1953 for the sprinters, and there's 2 crucial sprint points on the race route today.
Yeah, one after 2.5 laps on the circuit, up and down the Champs-Élysées, and then the final one on the finishing line. The one halfway through the course, or partway through the course, could earn the first rider to cross that line 20 points, and the first rider to cross the finishing line at 45 points, going down to 1 point for 20th place. And Mark Cavendish is really going to have to keep a very close eye on Jose Joaquim Rojas, because they are separated only by 15 points at the start of the day.
And 15 points, the spread between those 2 riders as we head out onto the last day's stage of racing. Nice wide boulevards. We could actually race today, couldn't we? But no, this is neutralized at the moment, waiting for the flag to go in. Now the flag is up, held by Christian Prudhomme. The man who designs the course, he found a great one this year, but denies he's not a genius, he said. It's the riders who make the bike race, not me. But he chose a very, very good course, which developed into one of the best Tours de France we've seen in many, many years. Evans rides in yellow on the last day of the Tour. That's the day you win it. Enjoying all of the cheers. Frank Schleck planning, by the way, in the new Tour of Colorado, when I'm told the correct name, I can't remember the correct name, Mr. Producer, on the Tour of Colorado in August, if you can just remind me. As we watch Cadel Evans, certainly the Schleck brothers will be there, and we're hoping that Cadel Evans might have a revenge in that race in August.
So at the back of the peloton, all these riders having a little bit of a chat to each other on the far side. I just noticed Nicholas Roach. He had a very difficult individual time trial yesterday. Number 88 briefly there at the back was Jose Joaquim Rojas, and he will be nurturing thoughts, Phil, of a possible last-minute turnover of the green jersey, but he's going to have to do something pretty special to outwit and outfox Mark Cavendish.
He is. It reminds me of the last day some years ago when Eric Zabel, he is the record holder of number of green jerseys, and Stuart O'Grady of Australia. On the very last day, they were separated by virtually half a dozen points. And Zabel was told by his team management he had to race for the points, which were out on the course, on the procession, as well as on the finishing line. Stuart was prepared to call a truce and was currently wearing the green jersey. But when we got to the finish, the situation reversed by 1 place. Zabel won the jersey and Stuart had to give it up. There's the Norwegian, Thor Hushovd. 2 victories for the Norwegian, 7 days in yellow. That's a World Championship performance.
Oh, it certainly is. I wonder if that little discussion there was possibly trying to set up negotiations, because You know, when people talk about the Tour de France, there's not supposed to be any transfers happen until the month of August, but very often riders start their negotiations during the month of July in the Tour de France, because this is when all of the best teams in the world are pulled together and all of the best riders in the world are pulled together. So it's a good point to have a little bit of extra cycling activity, and that could be on the lines of negotiations for future contracts.
Know it then, but they were operating on a future Tour de France champion. Christian Prudhomme is getting twitchy. His hand is on the flag. Took a little bit longer than anticipated. They're just on half an hour, in fact, to get the riders to a start, which should have been 20 minutes away. But that's the last day of the Tour de France. The pace will only get faster and faster. Don't expect a sprint. They're looking at each other, and they're continuing on the way. There would be no race for a few minutes, but we've got about 40 kilometres before we get to the action today, I reckon.
It's the first day, Phil, they haven't actually attacked from the gun.
It is. It's how fast they really do go. I love cycling in the Val de Marne, which is the valley we are coursing through at the moment, making our way towards Paris. We stay in the Val de Marne, then we enter the confines of Paris, then we go back in the Val de Marne, back into Paris, back in the Val de Marne, and finally end in Paris, where we enter for the last time with 58 kilometres to go. First time on the Champs-Élysées, a Frenchman going to win the Tour. They'd sold 1 million periscopes I don't know what it is in euros, but it was 50 French francs in the old days, €5 now, so everybody could see the race with periscopes. And on the line, I remember the French broadcaster going up to Eddy Merckx and say, "Eddie, you've lost your first Tour de France." Eddie looked at him and says, "No, I haven't." He says, "Well, you have." He says, you're 2 minutes behind Bernard Thévenet, and you've only got the Champs-Élysées to come." He says, "Yes, but I will attack as soon as the flag drops." He did attack as soon as the flag drops. They took a lead of like 3 minutes over the peloton. I'd never seen such a red-faced Bernard Thévenet in my life in the Maillot Jaune, hanging on to Eddy Merckx. And then Eddie, after a lap of pain, sat up and said, "Now, Bernard, you've won the Tour de France." And he sat up and they went back to the bunch.
Exactly. In fact, only a couple of years after that, I was riding in the Tour de France, 1979. Bernard Hinault was first overall, and Joop Zoetemelk was second overall, the Dutchman who'd finished second so many times to Eddy Merckx. Zoetemelk was not going to go down. He had a 2.5-minute deficit on Bernard Hinault, but then they attacked like crazy going through the valley of Chevreuse, and the two of them got away, and nobody could stay with them. And they raced the whole circuit of the Champs-Élysées just in front of the main field. There were only about 40 guys left in the main field behind chasing them, and then the bunch was split into 3 more groups. So don't tell me that they don't race on the final day on the Champs-Élysées, because it can happen. I've been there.
Absolutely. Are you in the third bunch, though, when?
I was in the second bunch. I was fifth on that occasion. Phil, third in the sprint.
Well, sorry, Paul. He was a good cyclist. You know me. I just love him. I think I'm going to start hugging him and kissing him like the Norwegian commentators did every time Thor Hushovd or Boysenhagen won a stage this Tour. Looking out, wandering around, trying to find now the Eiffel Tower for you, as the race is now 33 kilometres ridden today.
Oh, Phil, a nice little story about Cadel Evans, if you like, because after all, as we look down on the zoo of Vincennes, it was in 2005 Lance Armstrong actually retired here for the first time on the Champs-Élysées, having won his 7th Tour de France. And Cadel Evans actually rode that Tour de France and finished 11 minutes and 55 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. He finished in 8th place overall. And that night after the race, he went for dinner at the Meridian Hotel with his Italian girlfriend. When she came home from dinner, she had a little ring on her finger. And somebody said, "What's that supposed to be?" She said, "Well, we've got some news." And that was the day that they got engaged.
Well, just looking down at this rock here, this is part of the zoo here, which is the National Natural History Museum, and it covers 14.5 acres around the Paris area. And that rock is artificial, in fact, but it's 65 meters high. That's over 200 feet high. It was opened on the 2nd of June in 1934 by the then President of France.
Yeah, but it was modelled on the Hamburg Zoo. It's a little bit smaller than that zoo, but it's certainly a very interesting place to visit.
Well, it's straight down from the Arc de Triomphe into the faces of the riders, which would have made a difficult sprint for the green jersey and for the finish.
Well, a little bunny hop there. You might just have noticed the rider from Movistar jumping up onto the curb to try and move up around the outside. Everyone now that they're leaving Team BMC the right and the honour to ride onto the Champs-Élysées in first position. But once that is done, it's all back to war. It's all about trying to win this final stage on the Champs-Élysées. They're swinging around now. They're going to leave the other side of the Seine behind them. Underneath Le Châtelet there, when we're looking at this, is in fact the famous museum over to the right-hand side of the Louvre. And then they'll come out on the Rue de Rivoli.
We can't go in with our pictures, so by the magic of television, we will now nip to the other side as they come out the tunnel and then make the left-hand sweep, heading down Rue de Rivoli. With 8 laps to go to end the Tour de France.
Once they cross over the finishing line, they will face up to 48 kilometers to go, 8 circuits of 6 kilometers around the heart of Paris, and this is what it's all come down to, the final charge on the Champs-Élysées. Marcus Burghardt now is the rider from BMC Racing, lifting up the pace, but look at everyone behind, Phil. They're all starting to queue up, they're all waiting for the battle to commence.
Team BMC are bringing now their man, Cadel Evans, in yellow, the first Australian to win this Tour, which he's now just 48 kilometers away from doing, as he sweeps in the shadow there of the Opera. Their riders will now swing onto the Champs-Élysées. They will then see 8 laps to go. This is still, though, a very nervous time for Mark Cavendish. Only 15 points to the good in the green jersey competition. And in 2.5 laps' time, in the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe, he will have to take on Jose Rojas, because there's 20 points for the man that's first up the Arc de Triomphe.
And the best way to do that is to try and get the victory on the final stage. Over the lap now, Phil, with 8 circuits to go. George Hincapie goes first.
So as they start now, they've brought their man Cadel Evans onto the Champs-Élysées. It's taken 3,500 kilometers to reach it, but an Australian now will win at the Tour de France as we pan down the whole pack here as they now go past our commentary box.
Well, when you see the length of that main field, Phil, all of a sudden you get an idea of just how violent the race is on the Champs-Élysées. We look down there on the Grand Palais, just at the bottom end of the Champs-Élysées. What a magnificent place to have a bike race. This, I have to think, is one of the most beautiful finishes of any bike race in the world.
For 36 years they've been finishing on the Champs-Élysées. Throughout its history, the Tour de France has wandered round Europe for its star points, but it's always come home to Paris to finish. The 98th time the Tour has come into Paris. There's no fitter place for the greatest sporting event on an annual basis to come home to its capital city, right on its most famous street. A lovely vision here of Cadel Evans. The first day in yellow for him. It's the most important day to pull on that jersey. It's the last day of the Tour.
I tell you, up that, and if you've never actually ridden up the Champs-Élysées, Phil, you kind of tend to forget it is uphill, and it's very difficult at 50 kilometers an hour.
It is extremely difficult at 50 kilometers. Now look at the length. That just tells you how hard it is now as they've dragged out this whole length. 168 riders, 167 riders are completing the Tour de France of the 198. Now they're trying to get a group away here, and I would imagine that Cavendish and his HTC High Road team would love them to get away as long as Rojas isn't part of the lead group.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you cast your mind back to that very nasty accident that was in the Tour de France when 2 riders were taken out by a television car from France Television, Juan Antonio Fletcher was one of those riders. He's the man now, Phil, attacking at the front end of the race.
Well, to the left of the picture, you can see us turning round short of the Arc de Triomphe, because we've caused enough chaos in Paris today. If they close the Arc de Triomphe as a turning point, I don't know what they would do with the traffic. We are now going back down the Champs-Élysées, where they rattle you to death, these cobblestones. They really do. You just take a look at the chains on these bikes as they bounce now as Team Sky, and it is Juan Antonio Fletcher who's trying to get a breakaway on the move for Sky. Takes a look over his shoulder, and they've got an HTC rider up there as well. That's good. Was it TJ Van Garderen?
Lars Bak was the big man. He was the big man. Amazingly, he also riding his first ever Tour de France at 31 years of age. That big acceleration there coming from Juan Antonio Fletcher's prize. A number of riders off the front, but Team Liquigas Cannondale, they're having none of it. They're pulling it all back together. But did you see how quickly Cadel Evans and his boys got overtaken once the racing really started in earnest?
Well, is this the same Tour de France where moments ago they were laughing, joking, drinking champagne? Because not now, it isn't. They're trying to get a move here which might get a winning break on the way. Winning breaks have succeeded on the Champs-Élysées. That's not what Cavendish wants, because he wants to win for the 3rd time.
Well, that was Linus Gernemann, Leopard Trek, trying to get himself a little bit of glory, and this is the pressure at the back of the main field. I tell you what, there's a few boys, Phil, already gasping for a little bit of breath.
The last back is the rider on the right of our picture here, as they start to get themselves up into some sort of an action, as they really try to keep this going just at the moment.
Markel Irizar was the rider from Radio Shack. In fact, you can see, Phil, because of that acceleration, there's one or two riders have actually gone off the back of the group. Not a lot of fun on the last day.
Not now, as they race out across the Place de la Concorde. You must feel all at sea out there. It's a very, very wide section of road. It's he who gets there first in his car gets the right of way when they're normally open to traffic. There's no markings on the road for the lanes. You just get what you can win. And that's the way it is with the Tour de France today now, as they ride around the banks of the River Seine again, now turning a sharp left here, heading down for that tunnel again.
Well, this is looks like the figure of David Moncoutier on the back, one of those rare riders in the peloton who just has a very difficult time riding in the main body of a peloton. He's a little bit scared to rub shoulders with everybody else, but given the freedom of a mountain, he's quite happy to ride off the front end of the race. But today, he won't be too happy as he gets popped off the back of this group.
No, he won't. Just in front of him there, too, is Periger Keminer of the team of Thomas Voigtler. A couple of his teammates have been caught out there, including Anthony Charteau. The last year's King of the Mountains, Sammy Sanchez, gets that award this year. Now, they might repair the damage at the back. They're rather hoping they slow down just a little bit as we shoot down the underpass again to come out outside the Ferris wheel. Turning left, this will be a crucial part of the course when we come down to the end of the lap. We're going out onto lap number 2 when we get round there.
Yeah, there are 20 points for the first rider to cross the line, and Mark Cavendish will know that, and he'll be working out the combination. He'll be looking at if he was to come out of the main field, there's 9 points available for the first rider to cross the line. But if he doesn't see any movement, Phil, coming from Jose Joachim Rojas, I don't think he'll move either. I think he'll want to bank everything on the final sprint of the race.
And hope, because 45 points for the man who wins the stage today. So that obviously could really reverse the situation if Rojas was to take it out.
Well, anyway, Ben Swift, after making the effort to start this breakaway, had a little bit of a hard time getting himself onto the back wheel there of Christophe Riblon. The rider in there from Radio Shack is Sergio Paulinho, wearing number 77. He was the silver medalist in the Olympic Games in Athens.
Well, there's no doubt that Cav is taking this series. He's lined up behind his teammates here. Mark Renshaw, the big lead-out man, has got him on his slipstream. Rojas is here as well as they try to get it together now. The two lead-out men are going to take over.
Well, Rojas is coming on the outside in the lime green jersey there. Now watch what they're going to try and do here. They're going to try and get as many riders in front of Rojas as possible. You can see Cavendish, Phil, is going to get himself... Look at the acceleration of Cavendish here.
Well, it's all a done deal, this is. It's only for 9 points. Rojas is coming up late. He got third there, so he's lost a couple of points.
And that was because Renshaw came in, the Australian lead-out man for Mark Cavendish came in to make sure that he got across the line, put a bit of separation between Mark Cavendish and Rojas. Have a look at this again.
So the 15 points is now 17 in the bank, the buffer, as we go down to the finish as far as Cavendish is concerned, where there's 45 for the winner of the stage today. As you can see there, Rojas tried that late run, and I think Renshaw saw him coming and kicked again.
He certainly did. I think that was the plan. They wanted to get as many riders between Mark Cavendish and Rojas as they could, because they just want to keep stretching that gap. Now I think we'll have a little bit of respite for a while, and they'll wait and see how the rest of this race develops, and wait to see whether Garmin Cervelo and HTC High Road get themselves organised in this race, because they're looking at a gap of about 34 seconds on the 6 leaders.
Race down now, 20.9 kilometres to go, about 13 miles left to race.
Yep, and 40 seconds is the advantage of the 6 leaders. Cadel Evans now, Phil, getting that little bit closer to a very, very special occasion for him when he'll climb up onto the top step of the podium, which they'll bring out from one of the side streets here, by the way, and put it right in the middle of the Champs-Élysées. And that should be in a few moments' time. But till then, we've still got to get rid of these 12.5 miles of racing on the final few laps.
The boy in black for the Sky team, Ben Swift. It's his first Tour de France, and he is going to finish it today. That's a total achievement in itself. But I think for Ben, if he gets the finish with these 6 boys, he'll be going home with a stage win in his pocket too.
That's what he's looking for. That's what he really would like to try and get if he can on this final day on the Champs-Élysées around this corner. He will continue to pound on those pedals, because he knows if it does come down to the sprint, he's got a big chance of getting himself the victory. You can hear the bell just in the background.
You can probably hear the bell ringing. Well, that's for the breakaway. The peloton are coming through. The gap is 13 seconds. 6 kilometres to go.
Well, 13 seconds, and what's going to be very difficult now for the breakaway, Phil, is to survive on the uphill part of the course, because just looking at these guys, the fatigue is now starting to come in. The legs are burning with the lactic acid that started to mount up in them, but there's still, I'm surprised to see that HTC High Road still haven't come to the front to take the responsibility. They're backing off and waiting for the very last moment.
This is amazing. This is not the usual way the sprinters take it to the finish of the Tour de France. They normally like space to organise those sprint terrains. It's not working out. As Jangeli has just gone off on the right there. Somebody from Rabobank.
Carlos Barredo jumping out of the pack here. It's a very good move by him to try and really make a mess of everything for the sprinters. He knows he's got to try and ride across a gap here of 12 seconds, and a little bit of panic on board the Sprinters Express on the left-hand side of the road. Who's going to chase down this man?
And so there should be. He sensed that this isn't going to a normal sprint finish with the trains all doing it. He's taking his chance here, Carlos Barredo. And if he gets up there, this might be a very different finish to this Tour de France. Don't worry about Cadel Evans, all you viewers in Australia, because he's going to win the Tour now. He's 3 kilometres away from safety before the finish of the Tour.
Phil, that gap is now no longer 12 seconds. Swifty, look at him. You see he's riding in the gutter just on the right-hand side of the road there, and that's the smoothest part. It's a long piece of granite, and that's what gives him that little bit of an advantage. He knows now if anybody can ride off the front end of a group like this, Swifty can. He's got a great background on the track, and he knows how to really push himself into those pain levels. On his wheel, though, marking every move, every pedal stroke, is Lars Bak.
Yes, and Lars will ride now because there's nobody left. He's got to ride now, and he's taking on Ben Swift. Swift, who's won races this year in Australia, Spain, Switzerland, and the United States, is trying to win here in the centre of Paris, and it's the last day of the Tour de France. Is this spoiling the perfect day for the sprinters? Well, Ben Swift would love it to be that way, and he's trying desperately now to hang on to Lars Bak.
Well, he can't quite get into the slipstream of the big rider from Denmark, who's got a couple of bike lengths advantage. Carlos Barredo had tried again and again. The gap now down to just a mere 8 seconds as they take the turn at the top end of the Champs-Élysées. Swifty's lost the back wheel of Lars Bak. Now, I wonder what's going to happen with the HTC High Road lead out. They may well just give the chance to their man to get himself the victory, and what a lone victory that would turn out to be.
As soon as Sky have seen that Swifty can't make it, they're going to reorganise situations now for Boyson Hagen, their sprinter who's back in the pack. In the green jersey is Mark Cavendish. The white jersey in the front are his teammates. He's having to fight to get himself organised here. This is a most disorganised approach to the line, but now they've got the front. The team of HTC High Road all of a sudden have got a dead straight line. The train is about to leave the station.
22 years old, American TJ Van Garderen in first place, Danny Pate in second place, Peter Velits third. This is the big lead-out train they've been waiting for. They've got the big power, but they're in a difficult situation here, Phil, because they've got their own teammate Lars Bak at the front. However, I must believe that Mark Cavendish feels extremely confident that he can come up with the win this afternoon. Otherwise, they wouldn't chase down a teammate.
Well, Lars Bak is having to ride against his own team at the moment, knowing that they might eat him up. Cavendish is in a perfect position to the left of the bunch in the green jersey here. The team of Thor Hushoff dead centre in the white jersey. The blue helmet to Garmin Cervelo. They're trying to get Tyler Farrar up here, but there's always somebody willing to spoil the party. I can't see, it looks like 75 kilometres an hour there as they go down the side of the Champs-Élysées.
Yeah, a little bit bumpy as we go down the Champs-Élysées. We're pushing it up, we're touching 45 miles an hour. Swifty lost the wheel of Lars Bak now. This is a very strange finish now, because poor old HTC High Road, they've got the firepower, they know what they have to do, but they don't really want to chase down their own man.
Well, they're dangerous moments too for Cadel Evans, because they're bumping and barging the sprinters now, but the good news is we're inside 3 kilometres to go to the finish, and so there's no way now Cadel can lose the Tour de France. The 3 kilometre rule would apply if he were to crash now. He's won whatever happens as he heads out now on his last half lap of honour for Australia. Now all that Mark Cavendish wants to do is win the last stage, and that will also confirm his green jersey.
There's only one man at the front of this race now, and it's Mark Cavendish, his own teammate, as he sweeps across on the Champs-Élysées. Ben Swift is back in the peloton now. Now, this is going to be a rather interesting final 2.5 kilometres once they get themselves to the Rue de Rivoli.
Round the back, heading now for our last visit beneath the Garden of the Tuileries as the peloton still tries to wrap this up. Desperate moments. Lars Bak, the first man to congratulate Bak if he were to win, would be Mark Cavendish. Just reward for all the work he has done for Cavendish throughout 3 weeks of the Tour de France, but it's not going to happen. They're all together, led by the champion of Belgium, Philippe Gilbert.
Also the rider from Garmin in the blue helmet, that was Christian Van der Velde, whipping up the pace. All of a sudden, Lars Bak has been wiped away. Hushoft into second position, looking over his shoulder. He's looking to see if he can find the shape of his own team sprinter, Tyler Farrar. Taking a back seat now just for a little while. You've got Bernie Eisel, but behind Bernie Eisel you've got Matty Goss, you've got Mark Renshaw, then you've got Tony Martin in the mix somewhere, and the green jersey of Cavendish.
But
Cavendish
forget,
back now is in the driving
right
seat.
There, leading out, Rojas is in a brilliant position now to get the drop on Cavendish. And if Rojas finishes a few places ahead of Cavendish, Cavendish will lose his green jersey. This is the last turn down under the gardens. Then when you come out, you're 1 and a bit kilometres from the line.
Now they go under this tunnel of the Louvre now for the last time. They'll take the left-hand bend, and then all of a sudden across the road there, Phil, they will start to see that red kite, which will indicate the final kilometre of the Tour de France 2011. And still they're waiting to pick up the pace, Team HTC High Road. They've been here before. They've taken Mark Cavendish to the victory on 2 occasions on this very street, on this very avenue, and they will wait until the last possible moment to open up their firepower. Here it comes now. This is Bernie Eisel.
This is not a usual finish for them, but it looks as though Eisel this time has got himself under control. Cavendish is trying to hold position at the back behind Mark Renshaw. 900 metres to go to the end of the Tour de France. Cavendish has won twice here before. Can he get the hat-trick as they change partners at the front?
Tony Martin now, the winner of the time trial yesterday, is right up into first position. Behind him it's Matty Goss. Behind Matty Goss it's Renshaw. They've lined up the first 4 positions here as they come across the Place de la Concorde for the last time.
The world champion peels off. He's done his job for Tyler Farrar. Hushoff drops out of it. Now, this is where the missile launch as we entered onto the Champs-Élysées 2 years ago when he won by a mile. It's a deja vu. It's just Cavendish now is in the 3rd wheel. They've left it later because of the headwind that blows down this straight. Now, Renshaw will go. Cavendish is going with him. Boysenhagen is trying to get on his wheel. He'll never be as fast as Mark Cavendish. Eyes down because this one will be Mark Cavendish's 3rd win. As try as they might, Mark Cavendish gets win number 3 of his in history on the Champs-Élysées. He gets his 5th stage win of the Tour de France, and as he just told us, he gets the green jersey as champion.
And congratulated there, Phil, by Andre Greipel. Looking down there, you can just see the yellow jersey. This is the win.
There is the man who's won the Tour de France. The first to congratulate Cadel Evans, the first Australian to win the Tour de France, and he has done it on an American team, and they're all over him. It's going to be a big night in Australia tonight. It's already in the middle of the night in Australia, but they're all up watching the first ever Australian to win the Tour de France.
No, that was a brilliant performance by the team, you know. Sorry, that he's been in the right place all the time through this Tour, Phil. He's always assumed the responsibility when he had to. Let's not forget, it's a great night for Great Britain too, because we've got our first ever green jersey winner.
Mark Cavendish takes green, and it's right, you're right, Paul, the first UK rider to win that. Cadel Evans takes yellow. He's the fastest man, has gone round France to win the Maillot Jaune. This is how Cavendish did it, and let's not forget it's an Australian who always delivers him to the finishing line. Mark Renshaw from Bathurst in New South Wales, and once he's clear, there's no way that man ever runs out of fuel.
No, that was a brilliant performance by Cavendish, and as you say, Phil, it's always the team. You cannot be a top sprinter in the world of cycling anymore unless you've got a well-drilled lead-out squad like that. Renshaw, they don't even talk. It's just a natural instinct. They know exactly what they have to do at the right time. There was a big attempt there to try and come back by Edvald Boasson-Hagen, but sorry, the cab man, when he kicks into his overdrive, he really is something very, very special.
Tyler Farrar just behind Boasson-Hagen in the blue helmet. He's crossed the line in 4th place here. Mark Renshaw salutes the crowd because he's the man who has once again delivered Mark Cavendish to the finishing line of a stage of the Tour de France. Paul, he's now won 20 stages. He's too short of the record of a sprinter, and he's done it in 4 attempts.
It really is a remarkable there. It's all about the team. A great job of work. You know, when you look at the result, Phil, Mark Renshaw made that lead out. He did a victory salute himself because he was so happy, and he still finished in 13th place on the stage.
If he wasn't so dedicated to helping Mark Cavendish win, he could win a clutch of stages now. But this is the motion of the moment. Cadel Evans, twice second in the Tour de France, now gets his victory. Philippe Gilbert congratulates Mark Cavendish there. It was nice to see Andre Greipel, the first man to congratulate Cavendish when he crossed the line, because they're arch rivals in the sprint. But again, I think the triumph of the athlete has overcome the emotions of the Tour. Results for you. Edward Boysen-Hagen in 2nd place, had 2 seconds and 2 stage wins. Greipel got 3rd. Farah came home in 4th. Cancellara, now that's a fair result, in 5th place. The sprinter from Liquigas Cannondale, Daniel Oss, coming in 6th. Boschich tried to win, but they got 7th in the end. Top 10 completed by Jimmy Ongouvon of the Sochaux team. Well, Cavendish has kept the green jean jersey to the finish. We'll see him get that very shortly. We'll take a break now. We'll get ourselves ready for the presentations. And Robbie Ventura and Craig Hummel will be scurrying amongst the boys down there to see what interviews we can come up with. Cadel Evans wins by 1:34 over Andy Schleck, 2 minutes 30 over brother Frank, 3:20 over that great guy Thomas Voeckler, 3:57 over the defending champion for the past 2 years, Alberto Contador. Samuel Santos, 4th last year, has to be content 6th this time around, but is also the king of the mountains. Damiano Cunego gets the best ever finish for him in the Tour in 7th. Basso 8th. Tommy Danielson, the top American rider in his first Tour de France, finishes in 9th place overall, and the mountain biker Perrault is 10th. Well, we'll take another quick break here on what is now a beautiful evening in France, and then we'll come back with all of the podium. We'll see you back here in just a So we're looking now, we're waiting for the start of the presentation. First up, it's the man who's won the stage today. His 20th stage win throughout history, his 5th of this year's Tour de France. Mark Cavendish takes to the high spot on the Champs-Élysées. Mark Cavendish in the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe. He is in the incredible position, Paul, as having won on the Champs-Élysées 3 times now.
That really is quite remarkable. He really did it to perfection this afternoon. Maybe a little moment of a scare when he had that mechanical problem and had to change his bike, but that didn't ruffle his feathers at all. He waited, rallied the troops all around him, and put himself into the ideal position with what is turning out to be one of the most meticulous lead-out trains in the business.
The trophy there was given to him by Bertrand Delanoux, the mayor of Paris, as in his colors of HTC High Road, an American team from San Luis Obispo in California. He's gone into his team colors because very soon he'll be back here to receive the green jersey as winner. This is the first time the United Kingdom's ever seen this, and the Tour de France began in 1903. The first British cyclist took part at just after the turn of the century. We've waited an awful long time to see the green jersey pulled on the shoulders of a British cyclist who will be the first to remind me he comes from the Isle of Man.
Yeah, Andrew Bishop, the military attaché from the Embassy of Great Britain. And we'll see Mark Cavendish a little bit later on when they bring up all of the jersey presentations. But this is an extremely proud moment, I'd have to say, for him and for the Island of Man.
Yes, tremendous pictures there as Mark Cavendish gets what he's nearly had in the past, been robbed to him, controversially so, with sprint decisions and the referees docking him points, etc. But this one's for real. He has won that now, and he's now his next target next year will be to take the top sprinter's record and get more than 22 stage wins in history. He's got 20. Now, I wonder. Mark Cavendish wins in the end by quite a clear margin because he won the 45 at the finish. 3:34 played 2:72 of Rojas, Philippe Gilbert. Those top 3 were in the fight throughout the 3 weeks. And while that interview was going on, the polka dot jersey, the final winner's jersey, presented here to the Olympic champion Samuel Sanchez, who, when he realized he couldn't win the Tour de France, he went for the King of the Mountains, and he won it on the climb of Alpe d'Huez. And those are his 2 young children there. Proud moment for them as well, standing on the podium under the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe. This is the final standings. He got 108 points. Didn't have to worry about the weekend. There weren't any mountains. Andy Schleck finished second there, 98. Jelle van den Aert, a new discovery from Belgium. Jelle, he was finished in third. And Cadel Evans finished in fourth, but only with 58 points. We've gone back up now, Paul, to the white jersey presentation at the moment, and the big cheers reserved for a Frenchman.
Well, I'm not sure which you prefer, Phil, the white jersey or actually being a winner at the top of the Alpe d'Huez, because this is a magical tour, not only for him, but the whole of Team Europcar, with Thomas Voeckler having that yellow jersey. These guys did an awful lot of work. It was on that final day when Voeckler started to crack, he was given his own card to play. And I tell you what, he seriously took it.
Well, good for him. He got his award there from the president of French television too, which they've done an incredibly good job of televising the Tour de France. And are we looking at a man who might be replicating Cadel Evans? Maybe 2 years down the road. He's very young yet, but he's shown us he can climb. He's not a bad time trialist. He may have it.
Well, I think the important thing, Phil, is there are 4 Frenchmen finishing inside of the top 15 this year, and that will give France something to wish for over the next few years. The man on the right would be very happy, I think, not to be the last winner of the Tour de France for France, Bernard Hinault, and he would like to see French cycling start to take off.
He would. Well, Pierre Rollins for the best young rider, and he finishes top of the pile. The men that finished closest to him was Arain Taramé, followed by Jérôme Coppel and Arnold Janson. 3 of those guys are French, and that's the future of French cycling.
You know, it certainly is. Next man to come up. And this man has been an animator, I have to say. He's been in the breakaway. I don't know how many times, Phil. He's won himself the intermediate sprint point. I don't know how many times. Jeremy Roy.
Jeremy Roy, as they say. We would say Jeremy Roy if we were speaking English. And he has been in the front of our camera day after day. Every time there's a break gone for the whole day, he was in there. And so he was awarded cumulatively. He was away so much, nearly 800 kilometres he spent in front, so he gets the most aggressive rider.
Yeah, and I think if you had to give an award for the aggressive team, you'd also have to give it to his team, because FDJ were in nearly every breakaway. I think they were in every breakaway on the Tour de France whenever something got clear off the front of the pack.
Cadel Evans salutes the crowd on the Champs-Élysées. There is a huge population of Australians here today. I think they've been catching aeroplanes over in the last week of the tour, knowing that this day was surely going to come one day. In 2007 he was second, in 2008 he was second, but led the race for 5 days. He held the jersey one day last year, fell off and broke his elbow, and he was in terrible trouble. But now he is the champion of the Tour de France, and he's the first man from the Southern Hemisphere ever to win this great event.
He's going to savour this moment for a long, long time. It's interesting that he said, Phil, that the end of the time trial was really quite easy for him yesterday, because he knew at that point he wasn't even thinking about trying to win the time trial. He knew at that point that he'd actually won the Tour de France, and he cruised over the last 3 or 4 kilometres.
Bertrand Delado there, the mayor of Paris, applauding him. A Canadian in Paris on a beautiful late midsummer's afternoon here as we move towards the evening. It approaches 6 o'clock. You'll never see the Champs-Élysées as empty as this till the next Tour de France after he steps down. He won a time trial, he won the race at Mur de Bretagne. That was when he really signalled his intention to win this tour. He finished it off in the time trial. Now it's time. So as we look at Cadel Evans now, we've talked about this Schleck sandwich of the last few days, and in the middle, the filling proved a little bit too much for the indigestion of the 2 boys from Luxembourg. 3 great athletes, though, have made this a tremendous Tour de France.